My daughter hadn't spoken to me in 5 years after marrying a wealthy cardiologist. Then she called sweet and rehearsed, inviting me to his charity gala at the Four Seasons. On the way there, I found a wrecked SUV in the rain. A little girl inside couldn't breathe. I performed emergency surgery with a pocket knife and a plastic straw. I arrived late, soaked and covered in blood. My daughter looked straight at me, then turned away while security dragged me out. But the little girl's mother had seen everything, and she knew exactly who my son-in-law really was. That was when the real party began. Thank you for being here. Before we continue, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and standing up for what's right? Your perspective might help someone else today. One quick note, some details have been adjusted for storytelling. The heart of this story, the message is what I hope stays with you. I know exactly how many beats are left in Harold Benson's failing heart. Not in the way fortune tellers claim to predict lifespans, but in the way a surgeon learns to read the rhythm of muscle tissue wearing out after 80 years of pumping blood through a body that stopped being kind to it decades ago. The stethoscope rests cold against my palm in the examination room of my Dorchester clinic. Yellowed walls, fluorescent light, flickering in the corner, the faint smell of antiseptic that never quite masks the building's age. Mr. Benson, I say, pulling the stethoscope from his chest, your heart is working hard. Let's adjust your medication. He nods the way he always does, grateful without needing to say it. Harold Benson has been my patient for 15 years, ever since I opened this clinic in a neighborhood where most doctors won't work and fewer still will stay. He's 80 now, stage 3 heart failure, and he trusts me in the way people trust someone who's kept them alive longer than statistics said they deserved. Doc, he says, voice raspy but steady. You've been taking care of me 15 years. You're the only one who listens. I help him button his shirt. His fingers shake too much these days, and watch him shuffle toward the door where Rita waits with his prescriptions. Rita is my day nurse, 43 years old, with tired eyes and capable hands, and she's worked alongside me for 3 years without asking why a man with my credentials runs a clinic in Dorchester instead of an operating room at Mass General. She knows. Everyone who's been here long enough knows. When the examination room empties, I sit at my desk and let my eyes drift to the worn leather medical book in the corner, the one object in this entire clinic that doesn't belong to the poverty around it. The cover is brown cracked at the spine, and inside the front page is an inscription in handwriting I could recognize blind for Ernest. With all my love, Lenore, 1988. Below her name, a small hand-drawn clover in blue ink. Lenore gave me that book the day we married 36 years ago, when I was 22, and believed I could save everyone. She was smarter than me, she always was, and she knew the book would matter long after the wedding flowers died. 5 years ago, Lenore died. Not from a car accident or sudden illness, but from the kind of heart valve failure that should have been fixable if the research had been completed in time. I was head of cardiothoracic surgery at Harvard Medical School, then 53 years old, 1 year away from publishing the work that might have saved her and hundreds like her. 1 year too late. So I gave it up. The position, the salary, the operating rooms where I'd spent 3 decades proving I belonged. I came here to Dorchester, to this clinic, where the paint peels and the heating breaks every winter, because after Lenore died, I understood something I'd been too ambitious to see before time doesn't wait for credentials. If I was going to finish the heart valve project, if I was going to make sure the next person like her could live, I needed time more than I needed prestige. The stethoscope grows warm against my chest, where I've been holding it without realizing. 5 years of listening to other people's hearts because I couldn't save hers. I call through the open door, schedule Mr. Benson for next week, and hold my calls until afternoon. She nods and disappears down the hallway. I turn back to the book, running my thumb over Lenore's clover. The work is almost done, 9 more months, maybe 10, and the research will be ready to submit. Not for fame, not even for money. Just so the next Harold Benson's granddaughter doesn't have to hear a doctor say, "I'm sorry," when "I can fix this" should have been possible. The clinic quiets as afternoon stretches into evening. Outside the window, Dorchester in December, cold gray ordinary. I'm putting on my coat when my phone rings. The screen shows a name I haven't seen in 5 years, Celine. My daughter. 28 years old now, though I haven't seen her since Lenore's funeral, when she stood at the grave in expensive shoes and left before the reception ended. We used to be close when she was young, before medical school consumed my time. before she decided that a father who worked in Dorchester was an embarrassment she couldn't afford. I answer, Dad. Her voice is bright sweet in a way I don't recognize. Not the voice of someone who misses her father, but the voice of someone who's rehearsed this call. It's Celine. I know it's been a while, but I'd really love to see you tomorrow night. Tomorrow, I repeat. Yes, there's a charity dinner at the Four Seasons Boston, 7 o'clock, just a small family dinner. She pauses and I hear something in the silence calculation maybe, or the gap between what she's saying and what she means. Will you come? I notice what she doesn't ask. Not how are you, not what have you been doing. Not I'm sorry for 5 years of silence. Only the party, the time, the location. Who else will be there? I ask. Oh, just family, Merritt and I and a few close friends. Nothing formal. Her voice stays light, almost too light, like she's reading from a script someone else wrote. I really want you there, Dad. It's been too long. Why now? After 5 years of silence, why does my daughter's voice sound like someone rehearsed it? Why the Four Seasons when she knows I don't belong in places like that anymore? Why just family when she's spent half a decade making sure I'm not part of hers? But she's still my daughter. And 5 years is a long time to carry the weight of not knowing if reconciliation is still possible. I'll be there, I say. Perfect. I can hear the smile in her voice, but it doesn't reach the tone. It stays surface level, pleasant and empty. Don't be late, okay, 7 o'clock sharp. She hangs up before I can respond. I sit in my small office phone still in my hand and look out the window at Dorchester, getting dark. I set the phone down slowly. 3 days ago, when Merritt's project submission appeared in the Harvard Medical Advisory newsletter, I had called Sterling Wolf, my best student, now a federal IIP attorney, and asked him to quietly verify the archive records. I hadn't told anyone. I wasn't certain enough. But tonight's call from Celine, sweet and rehearsed and wrong, tells me I need to be. Streetlights flicker on one by one. Children run home from the park down the block. A distant car horn echoes off brick buildings. Normal as any other December evening. But something inside me, instinct learned from 30 years of watching people lie about symptoms, about pain, about how much time they think they have left, knows with certainty tomorrow will not be normal. The most dangerous thing about betrayal is that you remember being happy while it was happening. That Saturday night after Celine's call, I found myself thinking about the last time I'd seen her. November 2023, 13 months ago when she and Merritt came to visit. I remember feeling genuinely happy when they knocked on the door. Dad, your tea is the best, Celine said that afternoon, settling onto my worn sofa. She was 27, then wearing expensive clothes I couldn't have afforded even with the Harvard salary. Merritt and I were just saying we should visit more often. Merritt Prescott, 35 years old, ambitious cardiologist with a smile so perfect it belonged in the dental advertisements. My son-in-law married to Celine for 3 years, and I'd met him maybe 4 times total. He sat beside her, his hand resting on her knee. Professor Garrison, he said he always called me that. Never Dad, thank you for having us. Celine talks about you all the time. I made tea in the kitchen. Through the doorway I could hear them talking quietly in the living room. Words I couldn't make out, but the tone was warm, familiar. 4 minutes. That's how long the water took to boil. When I brought the tea tray out, Merritt's smile was waiting for me, perfect and bright. We talked about nothing important, the weather, the clinic, Celine's work. They stayed an hour. When they left, Celine hugged me at the door. We really will visit more, she said. They didn't. That was the last time until tonight's call. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn until Sterling Wolf's investigation file was presented to Desmond Whitfield months later, was what happened during those 4 minutes I spent boiling water. Merritt had pulled out his phone, angled it over the stack of handwritten documents on my coffee table, and methodically photographed 47 pages of my heart valve research. Pages I'd been working on for 3 decades. Pages that represented everything Lenore and I had built together. 47 pages, 4 minutes, one perfect smile. He drank my tea. He called me professor with that respectful tone. He put his arm around my daughter and told me how glad he was that we were family. And then he walked out with my life's work stored in his phone, ready to file it under his own name. The worst part isn't that he stole from me. The worst part is that I was happy while it happened. I watched them leave and thought maybe things were getting better. I'd been a surgeon long enough to know what it feels like when someone cuts you open, but I'd never known you could bleed without realizing the knife had already gone in. Now it's Saturday evening in December 14th, 2024, and I stand in my bedroom getting ready for the Four Seasons party. The navy suit still hangs in my closet, the one I bought for Celine's college graduation 8 years ago. It's the only suit I own that still fits. I button the shirt slowly. My hands are steady. 60 years of surgery trained them not to shake. In the mirror, I see a man who looks older than 58, with gray hair that needs cutting, and lines around his eyes that weren't there when Lenore was alive. That Lenore would laugh if she saw me now, I say to the empty room, dressing up to walk into a trap. But I'm going anyway because Celine is still my daughter. Because maybe I'm wrong about the suspicious sweetness in her voice. Because hope is a stupid, stubborn thing that doesn't die even after you know better. I open the top drawer of my dresser and take out the brown leather medical book, the one Lenore gave me on our wedding day, with her handwriting and the small blue clover inside the front cover. Since she died in 2019, I've carried this book every single day, not to read, not even to look at most of the time, just to have her close. I place it carefully in my left inner jacket pocket right over my heart. The weight settles against my chest like a hand resting there. The book goes here, I say quietly, right over my heart, like every day for 5 years. It's ritual, not reason. The same way some people wear their wedding rings long after their spouse is gone, I carry this book because letting go would mean accepting she's truly not coming back. And I'm not ready for that. The book feels heavier tonight, as if Lenore knows what's coming and wants to be there when it happens. I tie my tie in the mirror, a skill learned at 20 for my first hospital interview. The man looking back at me doesn't belong at the Four Seasons. He belongs in examination rooms with peeling paint and patients who pay in cash. But appearances don't change who you are, Four Seasons or Dorchester. I tell my reflection, I'm still the same man. I turn off the bedroom light and walk through the apartment checking windows, making sure the stove is off. Habits Lenore drilled into me when we were young. At the door, I put on the heavy coat that's kept me warm through 5 Boston winters without her. The book sits in my jacket pocket. I can feel its outline through the fabric. I lock the door and walk down 3 flights of narrow stairs to the street. Boston in December hits me immediately cold and dark already. At 6 in the evening, the sky swirling gray like a storm is building. The first snowflakes are starting to fall, small and tentative, disappearing when they touch pavement. I don't know it yet, but the book I'm carrying, the one I hold close every day as a ritual of grief, the one I can't let go of because letting go would mean admitting she's really gone, will save me tonight. I don't know that Lenore, always smarter than me, always 3 steps ahead, left something inside those pages that I haven't found yet. Something she knew I'd need, even though she died before any of this happened. All I know is the weight of the book against my heart and Selena's voice on the phone, sweet and wrong, calling me to a place where I don't belong. The snow falls harder. I start walking toward whatever trap is waiting at the Four Seasons, carrying the evidence I don't yet know I have. The thing about expensive hallways is they're built to carry whispers. I arrive at the Four Seasons just after 7 snow, falling harder now. Marcus Aldridge, the valet, in a crisp white jacket, looks at my 20-year-old Buick with the expression of a chef discovering a roach in his kitchen. He takes my keys with professional courtesy and gestures toward the entrance. I don't go through the front lobby. Something about Celine's voice makes me choose the side entrance instead, the ground floor hallway that curves past meeting rooms toward the VIP lounge. The carpet is so thick it swallows my footsteps. The lighting is soft, honey yellow. That's when I hear his voice. It comes from an alcove around the corner, a recessed doorway where service staff slips in and out. But acoustics in these buildings carry sound in strange ways, bouncing voices off marble and wood, until words travel farther than speakers realize. Merritt's voice. I recognize it immediately. Celeste, he says, and the way he says her name stops me cold. Not the tone for a colleague, the tone of someone who knows how that person sounds in the dark. After the signing, same place as always. I'll handle everything on my end. I stand very still, around the corner, out of sight. No, she doesn't suspect. Merritt continues, and I can hear the smile in his voice, that same perfect smile from the tea visit. By the time anyone figures it out, the contract will be signed. A pause. He's listening. I have to go, he says abruptly. Someone's coming. Footsteps move away deeper into the building. I wait 30 seconds before continuing down the hallway. Celeste, the billionaire's wife. Of course. The pieces click into place with surgical precision. Celine didn't invite me because she missed her father. They need me for something tonight. And Merritt isn't just stealing my work for money, he's building something more complex involving the man funding the project and the man's wife. I keep walking. I don't reveal I overheard. Gather all the information before you let the patient know what you found. The VIP lounge sits at the end of the hallway, marked by a brass plaque. Inside, the lighting is warmer. The scent of expensive perfume hangs in the air, something floral that probably costs more per ounce than my monthly rent. Solene stands beside one of the leather chairs, wearing a black dress I've never seen her hair pulled back like her mother used to wear it. For half a second, I forget why I'm angry. "Dad," she says, smiling. "You made it." Merritt appears from the corner, drink in hand, perfect smile already in place. "Professor Garrison," he says, "so glad you could join us." Solene picks up a manila file and hands it to me. Her fingers are steady, not nervous, not guilty, just efficient. "Dad, I need to explain something," she says. "The medical advisory board reviewing Merritt's project. They're questioning some technical terminology. They want clarification on a few mechanisms." I open the file. Inside are my pages reformatted and retyped under Merritt's name. "You'll just be in the background tonight," Solene continues. "If they have questions, you can help clarify. Nothing formal." "You're retired anyway," Merritt adds. "Let this help us reach the top. It's a good opportunity." I flip through the file slowly, page after page of my work, 3 decades of research with Merritt's name in the header. Then I reach page 45, and there it is. In the lower right corner, so small most people would miss it, a hand-drawn clover. 4 leaves and a stem done in blue ink, exactly the way Lenore drew it on every single document I wrote for 32 years. My heart skips a beat. Then it settles back into rhythm the same way it did in surgery when something unexpected appeared, and I had 3 seconds to decide whether to proceed or stop. That clover, Lenore's clover, sitting on page 45 of someone else's file like a ghost refusing to stay quiet. I look up at my daughter. She's watching me, and in her eyes I see the calculation. She knows what's on page 45. She's seen it. Maybe she warned Merritt, or maybe she saw it and said nothing, hoping I wouldn't notice. But she knows. I close the file carefully the way I used to close a patient chart after confirming a terminal diagnosis. "Yet how long have you known Solene?" My voice is calm, not angry, not hurt, just asking for information. Her smile doesn't falter, but something shifts behind her eyes. A calculation happening in real time, weighing whether to deny, to deflect, to lie. 3 seconds of silence. 3 seconds that feel like 30. Merritt starts to speak. "Professor, I don't think." But I raise one hand and he stops. Because even he can feel what's happening in this room. The air has changed. Solene is silent, and her silence speaks louder than any answer she could give. I nod, not in agreement, just to confirm I heard, to confirm I understand. Then I stand up the file still in my hand and look at my daughter one more time. The daughter I gave up Harvard to have time with. The daughter who just confirmed with 3 seconds of silence that she's known exactly what her husband did and chose to say nothing. "I need some air," I say. I walk toward the door, and neither of them tries to stop me. Sometimes the door you need opens from the side. You weren't watching. I'm walking away from the VIP lounge, the file still in my hand, and Solene's silence still ringing in my ears, when a woman steps out from an adjacent conference room and blocks my path. Not aggressively, just deliberately the way someone moves when they've decided something important and won't be talked out of it. She's around 55, dressed in a navy suit that's professional without trying to impress, with gray hair pulled back and eyes that look like they've spent 30 years watching people lie about symptoms. The gait of a physician who's learned to read what patients don't say. "Mr. Garrison?" She says, her voice low enough that it won't carry down the hallway. "I'm Adrian Sutton, Chief Medical Advisor to Mr. Whitfield. May I have a moment? I stop. I don't know this woman, don't know why she's seeking me out, but something in her tone makes me wait. I've been reviewing Dr. Prescott's submission. She continues, and now I understand why she stopped me. The technical work is impressive, very impressive, but there's something in the documentation that's been bothering me. She glances down the hallway, making sure we're alone, then looks back at me with the kind of directness that only comes from decades of delivering difficult news. "At that signature," she says. "The small clover mark on several of the pages. I've seen it before. I can't remember where it was years ago, maybe at a conference or in a journal submission, but I know I've seen it. And it wasn't associated with Dr. Prescott's name. My heart is beating steady the way it used to before surgery. Not faster, just more aware of each beat. You have 3 hours, Mr. Garrison. Adrian says. She doesn't explain what she means. She doesn't need to. The contract signing is scheduled for 10:30 tonight. After that, I have no authority to question it. But until then, I do. She reaches into her jacket pocket and pulls out a business card, placing it in my hand. If you have something to say about that signature, she tells me, you have until 10:30 to say it. Then she walks away, her footsteps measured and calm, disappearing around the corner toward the elevator bank. I stand in the hallway, her card in one hand and Merritt's file in the other. 3 hours. 180 minutes between now and losing everything Lenore and I built. I slip the card into my jacket pocket next to Lenore's book and start walking toward the main exit. The hallway stretches ahead of me, more soft lighting, more expensive carpet, more polished marble that reflects my face like I'm walking through someone else's life. I'm almost at the main corridor when I hear footsteps behind me, fast footsteps, purposeful. Professor? Merritt's voice, not the warm, charming tone from the VIP lounge, something else entirely. I turn. He's walking toward me quickly, and when he gets close enough that no one else can hear, all trace of that perfect smile is gone. His face is cold, calculated the expression of someone who's done the math, and knows exactly what cards he's holding. Old man, he says, his voice low and sharp. If you dare open your mouth about anything tonight, anything, I will report you for illegal medical practice. I don't respond, I just stand there watching him. Your surgical license expired 3 years ago. Merritt continues stepping closer. Never renewed, I checked. I have the documentation. Every surgery you've performed in that little Dorchester clinic since then, illegal. Every single one. He pauses, letting that sink in. That's 10 to 15 years in federal prison, Professor. For a man your age, you'd die there. I look at him for a long moment. The man who sat on my sofa drinking my tea. The man who married my daughter. The man who called me professor with that respectful tone while stealing 30 years of my work. He checked. Of course he checked. A thief who drinks your tea doesn't leave anything to chance. This isn't panic. This isn't someone scrambling to cover their tracks after being caught. This is a contingency plan prepared months ago, ready to deploy the moment I became a problem. Walk away now, Professor. Merritt says, his voice almost pleasant again, like he's giving friendly advice. While you still can. He doesn't wait for my response. He turns and walks back toward the VIP lounge, confident, unhurried, like a man who just won a chess game in 3 moves. I stand there for another moment, feeling the weight of Lenore's book in my jacket pocket and Adrian Sutton's business card beside it. Then I turn and walk toward the exit. The Four Seasons lobby spreads out before me. Marble floors polished to mirrors, crystal chandeliers, catching light from every angle, the kind of place where money doesn't talk because it doesn't need to. Marcus the valet sees me coming and already has my keys ready, still holding them like they're contaminated. I take the keys without a word and walk out the front door. The rain hits my face immediately, cold, sharp, real. Not the soft snow from earlier, but December rain that soaks through clothes and turns breath to fog. The kind of rain that makes you feel every year you've been alive. I cross the parking circle to where my Buick sits between 2 cars that cost more than I make in 5 years. I get in, start the engine, and sit there for a moment, listening to the rain drum on the roof. 3 hours until the contract is signed. Merritt's threat hanging over me like a knife. Soline's silence still echoing in my head. And somewhere in this building, a woman I've never met before is waiting to see if I'll use the door she just opened. I put the car in drive and pull out of the Four Seasons parking circle onto the wet Boston streets where headlights blur through rain and the city looks like it's dissolving. I drive away and I don't look back. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from calling someone who used to be your whole world and hearing nothing but silence on the other end. I drive away from the Four Seasons through rain that's turned from snow to something heavier, more relentless. The coastal boulevard curves along the harbor, normally scenic, but tonight just dark water and darker sky. The windshield wipers are struggling, beating back and forth in rhythm with my pulse. I pick up my phone at the first red light. My thumb hovers over Celine's name in my contacts for 3 seconds before I press it. It rings. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. Then her voice recorded cheerful, the version of my daughter that exists only in voicemail. Hi, you've reached Celine. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. The beep sounds. Celine, I say. It's your father. Call me back when you can. I hang up. The light turns green. I drive another mile before I call again. Same result. 4 rings. Her recorded voice. The beep. It's Celine. I need to talk to you about tonight. Please call me. I end the call and set the phone on the passenger seat. The screen stays dark. No callback, no text. Just the glow of passing streetlights reflecting off the glass. 4 rings, voicemail. 4 rings, voicemail. My daughter has caller ID. She knows it's me. I pick up the phone a third time, but this time I set it back down without dialing. If she won't listen on the phone, I'll say what needs to be said when we meet face to face. And we will meet face to face because whether Celine wants to acknowledge it or not, I'm still her father, and she's still my daughter. And 30 years of silence won't change that, though apparently 5 years can. The radio is playing low news and weather cycling through the same warnings on repeat. A woman's voice, calm and professional, tells me what I already know. The National Weather Service has issued a coastal flood advisory for Boston and surrounding areas through Sunday morning. High winds gusting to 40 miles per hour, heavy rainfall continuing through the night. Motorists are advised against non-essential travel until conditions improve. I look at the empty road ahead. Most people had the sense to stay home tonight. The boulevard stretches out like a tunnel through the rain, lit only by street lamps that turn the wet asphalt into mirrors. Lenore, I say to the empty car, if you could see me now, driving away from our daughter because she chose them over truth. The book is still in my left jacket pocket right over my heart. I can feel its outline through the fabric, the way I've felt it every day for 5 years. The weight of it has become so familiar, I barely notice it anymore. But tonight it feels heavier, like she knows what's happening and wants to remind me she's here. The storm outside is nothing compared to the one I'm driving away from. Rain hammers the roof of the Buick, turning the world outside into watercolor red taillights and yellow street lamps bleeding together into streaks of color that have no solid edges. I pass maybe 5 cars in 10 minutes, all of them driving slowly, carefully, like they're afraid the road might dissolve beneath them. My hands are steady on the wheel. 30 years of surgery taught them not to shake even when the rest of me wants to. My mind is racing through calculations 3 hours until the contract is signed. Adrienne Sutton's business card in my pocket next to Lenore's book, Merritt's threat about the expired surgical license hanging over everything like a knife. But mostly I'm thinking about Soline's silence, about what it costs a father to realize his daughter looked at stolen work with his wife's signature on it and chose to say nothing. About whether love is something you can stop feeling or just something you learn to carry differently. Then I see the red lights, brake lights flashing bright through the sheets of rain about 200 feet ahead. Someone hitting their brakes hard, the kind of sudden stop that means something's wrong. A silver SUV veers sharply to the right, overcorrecting the driver, losing control on the wet asphalt. I watch it happen in slow motion, the vehicle sliding sideways, then spinning slightly as it leaves the road, front end dipping into the grass embankment with a sickening lurch. One rear wheel lifts off the ground. The SUV tilts at a bad angle, teetering. Hazard lights start flashing, panicked, irregular, someone inside hitting buttons trying to signal for help. My foot moves to the brake pedal without conscious thought. Ahead of me, 3 cars, I count them. 3 simply swerve around the wreck and keep driving. Their taillights disappear into the rain like they never saw anything at all. 3 cars, I say out loud. 3 cars just drive past. The SUV's hazards keep flashing, desperate, irregular. Someone is in that vehicle. Someone needs help. And I'm a doctor. Not a surgeon anymore, maybe. Not licensed for the operating room. But still a doctor in the way that doesn't require paperwork. The way that means when you see someone who needs help, you stop. My foot is already on the brake before I consciously decide to stop. The Buick slows. I pull over about 50 feet past the wreck angle, the car onto the shoulder, and throw on my hazards. The rain is so loud against the roof, I can barely hear myself think. I reach for the door handle. 3 hours until the contract is signed. Merritt's threat hanging over me. Adrienne Sutton waiting for an answer I don't have. My daughter refusing to answer my calls. And here I am, about to step out into a Boston December storm to help someone I've never met, unaware that this 3-second decision to stop when 3 other cars wouldn't is about to change everything. I open the door. Rain and wind hit me immediately, soaking through my jacket before I've taken 2 steps. I start running toward the silver SUV with its flashing hazard lights, and I don't know it yet, but I'm running toward the moment that will save me. A woman's scream cuts through the December storm like a knife, the kind of sound a mother makes when she's watching her child die. I'm running before I fully process what I'm doing, feet pounding across wet asphalt rain, soaking through my jacket and plastering my hair to my skull. The silver SUV sits tilted in the grass embankment, hazard lights still flashing their panicked rhythm. A woman stands beside the vehicle, barefoot, dark dress, torn at the hem, hair disheveled and stuck to her face with rain and what might be tears. She's beating her fists against the rear door, screaming, "Please, please help her. My daughter, she can't breathe." I reach the SUV and look through the rear window. In the back seat, strapped into a child safety seat, is a little girl, maybe 8 years old. Her lips are blue. Not the pale blue of someone who's cold, the deep purplish blue of someone who isn't getting oxygen. Her chest is heaving in an abnormal rhythm, too fast, too shallow, the muscles between her ribs pulling inward with each desperate attempt. Her small hands are clutching the seatbelt straps, knuckles, white eyes wide with the kind of panic that comes from drowning on dry land. I know what this is before I finish looking. 35 years of medicine drilled the recognition into muscle memory: acute asthma, with severe airway obstruction. "Membo," I say, pulling out my phone. "I'm a doctor. What's her name?" "Ivy," the woman gasps. "Her name is Ivy. She has asthma. She's had it since she was 3. I forgot the EpiPen. I forgot." I dial 911 while yanking on the rear door handle. It's jammed bent from the impact. The door won't budge. 911, what's your emergency? "This is Dr. Ernest Garrison. I have an 8-year-old girl in respiratory distress, severe asthma attack, with suspected airway obstruction. We're on the coastal boulevard about 3 miles south of the harbor exit. Silver SUV, single vehicle accident. Ambulance is being dispatched, sir. Estimated arrival 15 minutes. 15 minutes. I look at Ivy through the window. Her lips are darker now. Her chest movements are getting weaker, not stronger. 15 minutes is too long. I run back to my Buick, pop the trunk, and grab the small toolbox I keep for emergencies. Inside, a utility knife with a 2-inch blade. I reach into the cup holder and find what I bought at a gas station this afternoon, a plastic drinking straw still in its wrapper. 35 years of surgery, hundreds of procedures in sterile operating rooms with surgical teams and proper equipment. Never once in a December storm with a pocket knife and a plastic straw. "Ma'am," I say, running back to the SUV, "I need to get to your daughter. Can you open the front door?" The woman, I realize I don't even know her name yet, nods and climbs around to the driver's side. The door opens with a groan of bent metal. I slide across the front seat and reach back to Ivy, my fingers finding the latch on her child's seat. "Ust," I say, keeping my voice calm the way I learned to do in surgery when everything is going wrong. And calm is the only thing that keeps people alive. "I need you to stay very still. I'm going to help you breathe." Her eyes find mine, blue eyes getting unfocused. She nods weakly. I unbuckle her and pull her forward, angling her on the seat so I can access her neck. My hands find the cricothyroid membrane by touch, the small depression between the thyroid and cricoid cartilage, the landmark every surgeon memorizes in their first year. The rain is still hammering down. The mother is beside me now, climbing halfway into the front seat, one hand on my shoulder. "What are you doing?" she asks, her voice breaking. "Emergency cricothyrotomy," I say. "Her airway is blocked. I need to create a new one." I don't wait for permission. There's no time. I pull a ballpoint pen from my jacket pocket, twist off the top, and remove the ink cartridge, leaving a hollow plastic tube rigid and clean. Then, I position Ivy's head back, slightly palpate the membrane one more time to be certain, and make the incision. 120 seconds. That's how long it takes from first cut to first clear breath. I count every single one. The knife makes a small horizontal incision through skin and membrane. My finger widens the opening. I insert the hollow pen barrel at a 45-degree angle, angling downward into the trachea. Blood mixes with rain on my hands. I secure the straw with pressure from my palm and watch Ivy's chest. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Her chest rises slightly, air moving through the makeshift tube, bypassing the obstruction, reaching her lungs. 40 seconds, 50. Her lips start to change color. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually, slowly, the purplish blue begins to fade toward pale pink. 60 seconds. Her breathing rhythm changes from desperate gasps to something more controlled, still labored, but steady. 90 seconds. Her eyes sharpen, coming back into focus. She's looking at me, confused, scared, but alive. 120 seconds. The mother kneels in the wet grass beside the open door, with both hands over her mouth, watching her daughter breathe. Ivy's chest rises and falls. Pink is spreading across her cheeks. Her fingers unclench from the seatbelt straps. She opens her mouth. It takes 2 tries and manages a hoarse whisper. "Who are you?" I look at this little girl I just saved using a pocket knife and a plastic straw in the middle of a December storm, and the first name that comes to mind isn't my own. "Russell," I say. "My name is Russell. That's Cole's. My father's name. The mechanic from Boston who taught me that working hands never need to apologize for calluses. The man who sat in the front row at my wedding and told me Lenore was smarter than me. I don't know it yet, but in 3 hours that name will be the thread that unravels everything. A doctor named Russell, Harvard Medical Records, Professor Ernest Garrison's son of Russell Garrison. The recognition chain that will save me. But right now, all I know is that Ivy is breathing, and her mother is crying, and somewhere in the distance I can hear sirens getting closer. There are some car engines you'd recognize in your sleep, and some betrayals you see coming before the headlights even reach you. I'm kneeling beside Ivy, one hand on her shoulder to keep her stable on her side, the other monitoring her pulse at her wrist. Her breathing is steady now, through the makeshift airway, the improvised tube rising and falling with each breath. The rain is still coming down, but lighter, shifting from torrential to merely heavy. Then I hear it, the low purr of a German engine, a BMW. I look up and see headlights approaching through the rain, slowing as they near the crashed SUV. The license plate comes into focus through the water, streaking down my face, MTR2847. I've known that combination for 5 years, seen it in the parking lot at family gatherings I wasn't invited to, on the few occasions when Celine called me over for holidays. Merritt's car. Relief floods through me for half a second. Merritt keeps a first aid kit in his trunk. I've seen it packed with proper supplies, sterile bandages, antiseptic. Exactly what I need right now. I wave with my free hand, trying to catch his attention. "Merritt," I shout over the rain. "I need the first aid kit from your trunk." The BMW slows to a crawl about 20 feet away. The driver's side window rolls down. 10 centimeters. I can see it precisely from where I'm kneeling. The window stops exactly 10 centimeters down, just enough for someone inside to look out and assess the situation. Just enough for Merritt to see everything. Me kneeling in the rain, Ivy with the makeshift airway tube protruding from her neck, blood on my hands and jacket. The crashed SUV. Celeste standing in the wet grass with her arms wrapped around herself. Merritt looks. I see his face clearly through that 10-centimeter gap. His expression doesn't change. No shock, no concern, just calculation. Then the window goes up. The BMW's engine revs slightly, and the car accelerates, pulling around the wreck and continuing down the coastal boulevard into the rain. Celeste jumps to her feet. "Stop!" she screams, running toward the road, waving both arms. "Please stop. My daughter needs help." But the BMW doesn't slow. The taillights disappear into the storm. In the last second before they pass completely, my eyes shift to the passenger seat. Through the rain-streaked window, I see Celine. She's looking down, not forward at the road, not back at me, down at her lap. Not because she doesn't see me kneeling in the rain beside a dying child. Because she's actively choosing not to look. 10 centimeters. That's how much my daughter opened the window between seeing and helping, between acknowledgement and pretending I don't exist. Celeste stands in the road, watching the taillights vanish, rain soaking through her torn dress, her bare feet on wet asphalt. "Who was that?" she asks, her voice breaking. "Why didn't they stop?" I don't answer. I turn my attention back to Ivy. "How is she?" Celeste asks, kneeling beside me again, her hands trembling as she reaches out to touch her daughter's face. She's stable," I tell her. "Breathing is steady, pulse is strong, she's going to be okay." Celeste starts crying again, not the panicked screaming from before, but quieter, deeper sobs that come from a place where relief and trauma live together. "She's had asthma since she was 3, Celeste says through the tears. "Severe asthma. I always keep an EpiPen in the car, always. But today I forgot we left St. Simon's in such a rush, and I forgot—" "Don't," I say quietly. "You can't carry that right now. Your daughter's alive. That's what matters." Ivy's eyes find mine, big blue eyes still frightened, but gradually becoming less panicked, as her breathing continues steady and strong. "I'm here, Ivy," I tell her softly. "I'm not going anywhere. You're doing great." She tries to speak, but I shake my head gently. "Don't talk yet, just breathe. The ambulance is almost here." Her small hand finds mine and squeezes. Not hard, just enough to say she understands. For 11 minutes, I am this child's entire world, and she is mine. Not Celine looking down at her lap. Not Merritt's window rolling up. Not the contract signing in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Not the stolen research or the expired license or any of it. Just an 8-year-old girl with blue eyes and a plastic straw keeping her alive, and a 60-year-old doctor kneeling in December, Rain remembering why he went to medical school 40 years ago. Not for the prestige, not for the salary, not even for the research. For this. For the moment when someone's life depends on whether you're there or not. The rain shifts to drizzle. The clouds begin to break slightly to the east. And between them, I can see a sliver of dark sky. The storm is passing. Celeste sits in the wet grass beside us, one hand on Ivy's arm, the other covering her mouth, as she watches her daughter breathe. "Thank you," she whispers. "Thank you, Russell. I don't know I can't even thank you." I nod. I still haven't told her my real name. I haven't asked her. At this moment, we're just two people keeping a child alive until help arrives. From far down the coastal boulevard comes a sound that cuts through the diminishing rain, a siren, growing louder, getting closer. Red and white lights begin to reflect off the wet pavement, maybe half a mile away. My hands are still shaking, not from fear, not from the cold, but because 35 years of surgical training just compressed into 120 seconds of emergency procedure, and my body is still processing what happened, the adrenaline that flooded my system when I saw Ivy's blue lips, the muscle memory that took over when I made the incision, the controlled terror of knowing one wrong angle would kill her. The ambulance rounds the curved lights, painting the wet road, an alternating red and white siren wailing. It's over. The professionals are here. And somewhere ahead in the rain, in a black BMW with a license plate, I'll never forget, my daughter is driving away. The sound of ambulance doors closing has a particular finality to it, especially when you've just given your real name to a stranger whose child you saved. Two paramedics jump from the ambulance, moving with practiced efficiency. The older one, maybe mid-40s with the calm movements of someone who's seen everything, kneels beside Ivy, while the younger one, barely 30, prepares the stretcher from the back. The older paramedic examines the cricothyrotomy with careful professional attention. His gloved fingers probe the edges of the incision, gently checking the placement of the improvised airway, assessing the angle of insertion. He's silent for maybe 15 seconds, and in those 15 seconds I can see him cataloging every detail. Then he looks up at me, still kneeling in the wet grass. "Sir," he says, his voice quiet but intense, "who performed this procedure?" "I did," I tell him. He holds my gaze for a long moment. Then he nods. Not the nod of a civilian thanking a good Samaritan. Not the nod of gratitude or surprise. The specific acknowledgement one surgeon gives another when recognizing work that saved a life. The kind of nod that says, "I see what you did here. I know how hard that was. I know what it took." Thomas Brennan, his name tag reads, 15 years of emergency medicine if the patch on his sleeve is current. "Nice work," he says simply. Then he turns back to Ivy, speaking softly to her as he prepares to transition her to the ambulance stretcher. "Ivy, we're going to move you now, okay? You're doing great." The younger paramedic, Kyle Martinez, according to his badge, works quickly with Thomas to stabilize Ivy for transport. They move with the synchronized efficiency of a team that's done this hundreds of times. Celeste climbs into the back of the ambulance, behind the stretcher, her bare feet leaving wet prints on the metal step. But in the moment before the door closes, she reaches back through the gap and grabs my hand. "What is your name?" she asks, her voice urgent. "Your real name, please." I look at this woman, whose child I just saved with a pocket knife and a plastic straw, whose gratitude is written in every line of her rain-streaked face. "Ernest," I tell her. "Ernest Garrison." She squeezes my hand once hard, then lets go, as Thomas gently guides her back inside. The door closes with that final hollow sound. The siren wails to life. The ambulance pulls away red and white lights painting the wet road as it disappears down the coastal boulevard toward Memorial Hospital. And I stand alone on the sidewalk in my blood-soaked suit, watching the taillights fade into the drizzle. My hands are trembling now. Really trembling, not just the small shake from before. 35 years of surgery, and this is the first time my hands shake after the patient is safe. I look down at them, blood on the knuckles from when I was working on Ivy rain-soaked fabric, clinging to my arms, mud on my shoes from kneeling in the wet grass. I look like someone who fought a war and lost. But Ivy's alive. Her lips were pink when they loaded her into the ambulance. Her breathing was steady. I won. I walk back to my Buick. The engine starts on the first try, loyal as always. I sit there for a moment, with the heater blowing cold air that will eventually turn warm, watching the rain streak down the windshield. Then I drive back to the Four Seasons. 46 minutes later, I enter the lobby for the second time that night. This time I'm different. My suit is soaked through with December rain. Dried blood stains my chest, Ivy's blood from the cut on her forehead when the SUV crashed. More blood marks the backs of both hands. Boston mud cakes my dress shoes, leaving prints on the pristine marble floor. The lobby falls silent in waves. Not all at once. It starts with the people nearest the entrance, a woman in pearls and a black dress who sees me first and stops mid-sentence to her companion. Then the man she's talking to turns and sees what she's looking at. Then the couple behind them notices everyone staring and follows their gaze to me. The silence spreads like spilled water rippling outward across the thick carpet past the front desk, where two clerks freeze with phones in hand, past the small seating area where a group in formal wear sit with champagne glasses halfway to their lips. 50 people, maybe more. The lobby isn't packed, but it's busy enough that my entrance becomes a spectacle. 50 people, 50 sets of eyes. Not one person asks if I'm hurt. A security guard near the elevators takes half a step forward, then stops when he sees my face. Whatever he reads there makes him decide that approaching me isn't worth it. I walk straight through the center of the lobby, not skulking along the walls, not trying to hide or minimize my presence. Just walking with the same steady gait I used to use when crossing from the parking garage to the operating room at Harvard, purpose in every step. I left my phone and wallet in Celine's car before going into the VIP lounge. I need them back. But more than that, I need to see her face when I walk in like this. I need to see Merritt's expression when the man whose work he stole walks into his celebration covered in blood. The Spanish ballroom doors are ahead, brass handles gleaming under the lobby lights. Behind me, I can hear the murmurs starting quiet voices, speculating about who I am, what happened, why security isn't doing anything. I don't turn around. I reach the doors and pause for just a moment, looking down at my hands one more time. Dried blood under my fingernails. Rain still dripping from my jacket sleeves. The outline of Lenore's book pressing against my chest from the left inner pocket. Inside, I can hear the orchestra, the murmur of 300 voices, champagne glasses clinking, the sound of a party that's been going on for hours without me. I push the doors open and step inside. The worst silence isn't the one that falls when you enter a room. It's the one that lives in your daughter's eyes when she sees you and chooses to look away. The doors swing open and I step inside. The Spanish ballroom spreads before me, crystal chandeliers catching light from every angle, 300 guests in formal wear tables draped in white cloth, an orchestra in the corner playing something classical I don't recognize. The kind of room where money doesn't talk because it doesn't need to. The silence starts nearest the door and spreads outward like a wave. Conversations stop mid-sentence. People turn. The orchestra plays on for another few measures before the conductor notices the audience isn't listening anymore and brings them to a ragged stop. 300 faces turn toward me. I'm still soaked through from the rain. Blood still stains my chest and hands. Mud still cakes my shoes, leaving prints on the pristine white carpet. I see Celine immediately. She's standing near the center of the room, beside Merritt, a champagne glass in her hand, wearing a dress that probably costs more than I make in 6 months. She sees me too. Our eyes meet. For one full second, she looks directly at me. Recognition in her eyes. No surprise, no shock. Just acknowledgement that, yes, that's her father, standing in the doorway covered in blood. Then she turns away. Not quickly, not startled. She simply consciously, deliberately turns her face to the side and looks at something else. Anything else. The orchestra. The chandelier. The champagne in her glass. I stand motionless, watching my daughter choose not to see me. Then Merritt moves. Not with panic, not with surprise, with the calculated precision of someone who prepared for exactly this possibility. He points at me and calls out in a voice loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, loud enough for the senator at table 12 and the mayor at table 7. This homeless man has been following me all night trying to extort money. Someone hold him. The room holds its breath. 2 security guards move toward me from opposite sides of the ballroom. Harrison Fletcher approaches from my left, head of security, maybe 50, with the bearing of someone who's spent 15 years protecting people who believe they're more important than they are. Robert Hayes comes from my right, younger, broader, probably hired more for size than experience. I don't resist. I don't speak. I just look at Celine. Soline, I say, just her name, nothing else. She doesn't turn. She doesn't speak. She lifts the champagne glass to her lips and takes a sip. The guards reach me. Fletcher takes my left arm, Hayes my right. They twist my hands behind my back, not gently, not with the consideration you'd give someone who might be innocent, with the efficiency of men removing a problem. The pressure on my wrists sends sharp pain up my forearms, but I don't make a sound. They escort me back through the doors I just entered across the lobby, that's somehow grown even more silent, and out the front entrance into the December night. The doors close behind me with a soft, expensive thud. The guards go back inside without a word, leaving me standing alone on the front steps. I sit down on the cold marble, not because I'm exhausted, but because my hands are still trembling from the emergency procedure and I don't trust myself to drive yet. Boston after a December storm smells like wet asphalt and sea salt from the distant harbor. Car exhaust mixes with pine from the hotel's landscaping. The air is cold and clean, in the way it only gets after rain washes everything away. I place my hand over my left chest and feel the reassuring weight of Lenore's book in my inner jacket pocket, right where it's been every day for 5 years, right over my heart. I close my eyes. Lenore, I say to the empty night, if you could see this, your daughter, our daughter, maybe she would laugh, I think. She always found irony in things I couldn't see until later. She would probably say something like, well, Ernest, what did you expect Jan Seals? Olaf expect you all. In that voice she used when she was being right about something I didn't want to admit. 2 years of silence, 2 years of choosing him over truth, over me, over her own mother's memory. I sit on those cold steps and let myself think about the one piece of information that changes everything, the detail that Sterling Wolf's investigation revealed when he presented his files to the advisory board earlier tonight. September 2022. Over 2 years ago, Celine had asked Merritt about document image files she'd seen on his phone. Files that showed pages of handwritten medical research with a small clover drawn in blue ink at the bottom of several pages. Lenore's clover, the signature she put on everything I wrote for 32 years of marriage. Celine had seen it, had recognized it, had asked her husband about it, and Merritt had lied to her face, telling her those were documents from a colleague borrowed for reference, nothing to worry about. And Celine, my daughter Lenore's daughter, had chosen to believe him. Not because she was deceived, not because she couldn't have known better, but because she didn't want to lose the life she had, the money, the status, the perfect smile of a man who drinks tea with his father-in-law while stealing 30 years of his work. September 2022. 2 years. Not 2 days of silence, not 2 weeks of complicity, 2 full years of knowing and choosing not to see. I understand now. Understanding doesn't require forgiveness. I sit there on the cold marble steps of the Four Seasons Blood, drying on my hands, rain dripping from my jacket, and I understand my daughter completely for the first time in 5 years. She's not a victim, she's not deceived, she's made her choice and she's made it over and over again for 2 years straight. I don't know how long I sit there, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20. Time moves strangely when you're sitting in the rubble of something that used to be a family. Then I hear it, the sound of wheels on wet cobblestone. I open my eyes. A black Suburban is entering the gates of the Four Seasons headlights, cutting through the darkness. The engine stops, the door opens, and someone is stepping out in the yellow light of the entrance. The woman who stepped from the black Suburban moved like someone who'd spent 40 years teaching children that running in hallways was unacceptable, unhurried, certain, the kind of presence that made grown men straighten their posture without thinking about it. Celesta Whitfield. I recognize her immediately, even though we met only an hour ago in the rain on the coastal boulevard. She's changed from the torn dress into a dark coat, her hair no longer wild with rain, but pulled back with the same precision she probably used in classrooms for decades. 68 years old, retired principal, and she moves with the authority of someone who spent a lifetime making teenagers sit down and listen. Her eyes sweep the Four Seasons entrance and lock on me, sitting on the cold marble steps. She crosses to me directly, ignoring the valet who tries to take her coat, ignoring the doorman who moves to assist her. Just walks straight to where I'm sitting in my blood-stained suit with my disheveled hair and bruised wrists. I try to stand. My legs protest they've been sitting too long, in the cold muscles stiff and aching. I manage to get halfway up before she reaches me. Ernest, she says, not a question, a statement of recognition and respect. "Mrs. Whitfield," I start, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "I'm sorry they won't let me." Her gaze drops to my wrists. The bruises are clearly visible now, in the yellow light spilling from the lobby, dark marks where Harrison Fletcher and Robert Hayes twisted my arms behind my back. Finger-shaped bruises, the kind that tell a story about how someone was treated. Her expression doesn't change, but something hardens in her eyes. "Ivy is safe," she says quietly, and I feel something break loose in my chest. "She's at Memorial. Russell just left the hospital to meet us here. They're taking good care of her." My shoulders drop. My eyes close for just a second. The relief is so physical, it's almost painful. Ivy is safe. The little girl with blue eyes who asked me who I was. The child whose life I saved with a pocket knife and a plastic straw. Safe. She told us everything. Celeste continues, and now there's weight in her voice. About the research, about Lenore's work. I open my eyes and look at her. Someone believes me. Not just someone. Celeste Whitfield, Desmond Whitfield's mother. The matriarch of the family, whose party I just disrupted, whose security just threw me out, whose son is funding Merritt's stolen research. And she believes me. "Come in with me," she says simply. I shake my head. "I can't. They already..." If they whisper, she says, "You can." She doesn't wait for my response. She just turns toward the entrance and starts walking up the steps. I follow because I don't know what else to do. My wrists ache where the security guards grabbed me. The cold has seeped through my jacket and into my bones. My legs feel like they're made of something heavier than muscle and bone. But I follow Celeste Whitfield up the steps toward the Four Seasons entrance. Harrison Fletcher is there, standing just inside the lobby, probably watching for me in case I tried to come back. When he sees Celeste with me, his posture stiffens. He steps forward. Ma'am, I'm afraid." Celeste stops. She doesn't say anything. She just looks at him. One look, silent, direct. It contains 40 years of principal authority. 40 years of dealing with teenagers who thought they could argue their way out of consequences. 40 years of making grown parents sit in her office and explain why their children shouldn't be expelled. 40 years of being the final word in any conversation. Harrison's mouth opens, then closes. He steps back without finishing his sentence. Celeste walks past him. I follow, still not quite believing what I'm seeing. We enter the lobby, and I feel the warmth hit my face after the December cold outside. The sudden shift in temperature makes my skin sting. The lobby isn't empty. Maybe 40 people scattered across the space, some checking in at the desk, some waiting for elevators, some sitting in the plush chairs near the fireplace. Conversations stop mid-sentence. A woman in pearls freezes with a champagne glass halfway to her lips. A man in a tuxedo stands with his phone still raised to his ear, staring. The valet who saw me dragged out an hour ago is now staring open-mouthed as I walk back in beside Celeste Whitfield. I feel every eye on us. Celeste's pace never changes. She walks across the lobby toward the elevators with the same measured stride she probably used when crossing her school's hallways between classes. Not hurrying, not slowing, just moving with absolute certainty. I stay beside her, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes tracking our movement across the marble floor. Our footsteps echo in the sudden silence. The soft background music from hidden speakers seems louder now that no one is talking. A woman whispers something to her companion. A man reaches for his phone, but no one approaches. No one tries to stop us. We reach the elevators. Celeste presses the call button. The chime sounds unnaturally loud in the quiet lobby. The doors slide open immediately. Celeste gestures toward the interior. "After you, Ernest." I step inside. She follows. The doors begin to close. In the last sliver of closing light, I see movement at the far end of the lobby, someone stepping out of the hallway that leads from the parking garage. Russell, Celeste's other son, the doctor from Memorial Hospital, who must have just arrived from checking on Ivy. He sees me, standing in the elevator beside his mother. His face goes slack with recognition. Then the doors close and we're rising toward the 12th floor, where 300 guests are celebrating Merritt's stolen triumph, completely unaware that everything is about to change. The phone rang 3 floors up, and Celeste answered it without breaking stride, her voice cool and professional, even as the elevator climbed toward a party where everything was about to shatter. The elevator hums softly around us, rising through the 4 seasons toward the 12th floor. The numbers above the door tick upward, 5, 6, 7, each floor bringing us closer to whatever is waiting in that ballroom. Celeste's phone rings. She pulls it from her coat pocket and answers without hesitation. Yes, this is Celeste Whitfield, she says. A pause. What's happened? I watch her face as she listens. The elevator continues rising. 8-9. I see, she says. Another pause longer this time. Russell. Are you certain? My heart skips. Russell. The name I gave Ivy when she asked who I was. My father's name. Harvard records, Celeste repeats, and now she's looking at me with an expression I can't quite read. Russell Garrison was the father of... She stops, her eyes sharpen with recognition. And Ernest Garrison. She says into the phone, but she's still looking at me. Ernest Garrison of Harvard Medical School. The elevator reaches 10. Thank you, Dr. Mercer, she says. Yes, I understand. I'll call you back shortly. She ends the call and lowers the phone slowly. Ernest Garrison of Harvard Medical School. She says again, this time as a question directed at me. I nod. I was, a long time ago. In head of cardiothoracic surgery, she says, and it's not a question anymore. I know that name. My husband knew that name. Desmond has spoken of you. The elevator chimes softly as it reaches 11. The heart valve research. She continues, pieces clicking into place behind her eyes. The work Merritt is presenting tonight. That's yours. Yes, I say simply. The recognition in her face shifts to something else. Not pity, not sympathy, understanding. She's no longer just helping an old man who saved her granddaughter's life. She's standing beside someone whose work she's heard about, whose name carries weight in circles that matter to her family. The elevator reaches 12 and stops. My hands are trembling, not from fear, from counting floors, from knowing that each number brought me closer to this moment, the confrontation I've been dreading and desperate for since I learned the truth about the theft. The doors slide open. Celeste steps out first. I follow her down a short hallway, carpeted in deep burgundy walls, hung with tasteful art that probably costs more than my annual clinic income. The Spanish ballroom is at the end, marked by ornate double doors. We can hear the orchestra playing, the murmur of 300 voices, glasses clinking, the sound of a celebration in full swing. Celeste pauses at the doors and looks at me. Ready? She asks quietly. No, I tell her, but it doesn't matter anymore. She nods once, then pushes both doors open. Sound and light pour out. The orchestra mid-phrase, conversation layered upon conversation, crystal chandeliers catching light from every angle. 300 guests in formal wear tables covered in white cloth, champagne, flowing, the whole machinery of wealth and prestige in motion. I step inside beside Celeste. The silence doesn't fall all at once. It spreads like water, freezing starting at the door and radiating outward. The people nearest us notice first, conversations, faltering heads turning. Then the people behind them see what everyone is staring at and stop talking. Then the ones beyond them. The orchestra keeps playing for maybe 5 more seconds before the conductor realizes his audience isn't listening and brings them to a ragged stop. 300 faces turn toward us. I'm still in my blood-stained suit, still disheveled, still carrying the marks of this night on every visible surface. But this time, I'm not alone. This time, I'm standing beside Celeste Whitfield, and everyone in this room knows what that means. Merritt stands at the dais near the front of the room. There's a table beside him with papers spread across it, the contract, I assume. He holds a pen in his hand, frozen halfway to the signature line. His face goes pale. Solane is sitting at a table to his right. She sees Celeste, first then me, and this time she doesn't look away. She can't. Whatever power she had to turn her face and pretend I don't exist has been stripped away by Celeste's presence. And then Desmond Whitfield rises. He's been sitting at the head table, the seat of honor, surrounded by people I don't recognize but who carry themselves with the weight of money and influence. He's maybe 65, wearing a tuxedo that probably costs as much as a used car. Silver hair perfectly styled, the bearing of someone who's spent decades being the most important person in every room he enters. Celeste's husband, the billionaire funding this entire project, the man whose money Merritt used to steal my life's work. He stands slowly, his eyes moving from his wife to me and back again. Mother, he says, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Then he walks down from the dais. Not quickly, not with anger or surprise, just measured, deliberate steps that draw every eye in the room, walking toward his mother and the bloodied man standing beside her. Behind him, Merritt's pen hovers frozen above the signature line. The contract unsigned, the celebration abandoned, 300 witnesses holding their breath. Desmond stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could see the question forming in his eyes before his mouth opened, not anger, yet just confusion at why his mother would bring a bloodied stranger to his celebration. Celeste steps forward before he can speak. "Desmond," she says, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom with the precision of someone who spent 40 years commanding classrooms. "An hour ago, an SUV overturned in the December storm on the coastal boulevard. My granddaughter was inside. She stopped breathing." The room holds its breath. 27 cars. Celeste continues, each word measured and clear. "I counted each one that passed while Ivy fought to breathe. 27 cars saw us in the rain, with our hazard lights flashing. 27 drivers looked at a mother standing in the road waving for help. And 27 cars drove past without stopping." She pauses. The silence in the ballroom is so complete I can hear my own heartbeat. "One man stopped," Celeste says. "He used a pocket knife and a plastic straw to perform emergency surgery. 120 seconds from first cut to first breath. He saved my granddaughter's life while kneeling in the mud in December rain." She turns and looks at me, then she reaches for my wrist and gently lifts it so everyone can see. The bruises are dark and obvious under the chandelier light. Finger-shaped marks where Harrison Fletcher and Robert Hayes twisted my arms behind my back. And these bruises? Celeste says, her voice harder. "This is what the people in this room did to him when he returned." The ballroom absorbs this in waves. I watch faces shift from confusion to understanding to shame. A woman near the front lowers her eyes. A man in a tuxedo sets down his champagne glass carefully, like he's suddenly aware of how it looks. Desmond stares at my wrists, then at my blood-stained suit, then at my face. I watch Celeste recount the night in clinical detail. 27 cars, 120 seconds, one plastic straw, hearing my own desperate actions translated into her measured principal's voice. Every word precise, every detail accurate. No drama, no embellishment. Just the mathematics of abandonment and the simple fact of one man who stopped. Desmond takes a step closer to me. He's studying my face with intensity. I don't understand at first. Then his expression changes. Recognition. "Professor Garrison," he says slowly. I nod slightly. "Ernest Garrison." He says again, testing the name like he's pulling it from somewhere deep in memory. Then Desmond Whitfield does something I never expected. He kneels. Not a slight bow, not a nod of respect. He actually kneels on the ballroom floor in his expensive tuxedo, a 65-year-old billionaire lowering himself to one knee in front of a man his security dragged out 2 hours ago. "Professor Garrison," he says, looking up at me. "Ernest Garrison of Harvard Medical School. You performed life-saving heart surgery on me 20 years ago at Massachusetts General Hospital. The memory comes back to me in fragments. A younger man on an operating table. Emergency valve reconstruction. 3-hour surgery that should have taken 5. His face pale under the surgical lights. "I remember your name," Desmond says, "as I remember my father's." He stands slowly, and when he looks at me now, it's not as a stranger or an intruder or a problem to be removed. It's as someone who owes me his life. Then he turns toward the dais where Merritt stands frozen. "Mr. Prescott," Desmond says, his voice carrying across the silent room. "You presented this heart valve reconstruction work as your invention. You've spent the evening accepting congratulations for pioneering research that would revolutionize cardiac surgery." He gestures toward me. Its author stands before me, the man who saved my life, the man who saved my mother's granddaughter tonight, using skills that take 30 years to develop. Desmond's voice doesn't rise. He doesn't need to shout. The authority in his tone is absolute. "I want your explanation, Mr. Prescott, now, in front of everyone here." Merritt stands at the dais contract, spread before him, pen still in his hand. 300 witnesses watch his face. I can see the calculation happening behind his eyes. The mathematics of denial versus confession. The cost of truth measured against the cost of lies in front of Boston's elite. Whether to double down or admit defeat. Whether to attack me or surrender. His face cycles through expressions, shock, fear, anger, calculation, all in the span of maybe 5 seconds. Then he opens his mouth to speak. Before I tell you what Merritt says next, if you're still here right now, comment A or B A if you think he'll confess the truth, or B if you think he'll keep lying. Add one short reason, so I can see how you're reading this. Please note, What follows includes some recreated details for narrative depth. The message behind it is what matters. If dramatized elements aren't for you, you're free to stop here. Merritt's mouth closes again. Opens. His hand tightens on the pen. Soline is sitting at a nearby table, her champagne glass forgotten. She's staring at her husband with an expression I can't quite read. Not surprise, not shock, something else. The face of someone watching a structure they built carefully start to collapse. Merritt looks at Celine, then at Desmond, then at me. Finally, he looks at the contract unsigned before him, at the pen in his hand that was supposed to seal a deal worth millions, at the 300 witnesses who came to celebrate his triumph. "Mr. Whitfield," he says, and his voice sounds different now. Not confident, not charming, just careful. "I can explain." "Oh, then explain," Desmond says. The ballroom waits. Merritt Prescott stands at the dais with the pen still in his hand, 300 witnesses watching his face, and I see the exact moment he decides which lie to tell next. Merritt straightened his shoulders, his expression shifting from defensive to calculated. The leather portfolio in front of him became a weapon as he opened it with deliberate precision, extracting a single document. "Before we indulge Dr. Garrison's theatrics," he said, his voice gaining confidence, "the board should know something relevant about the man making these accusations." Desmond's eyes narrowed. "Get to your point, Prescott." Ernest Garrison's medical license expired 3 years ago. Merritt slid the document across the table toward Desmond. Yet, he's been treating patients conducting research and representing himself as a practicing physician. That's illegal in every jurisdiction. The conference room went silent. I felt every eye turn toward me. "I have documentation of at least 47 patient consultations over the past 3 years. Merritt continued his confidence building. Each one represents a separate count of practicing medicine without a valid license. I'm prepared to testify to the district attorney's office if necessary." The entry twist hit exactly where he'd aimed it, not at the research theft, but at my credibility. Weaponizing administrative oversight against decades of legitimate work. "My license lapsed during Lenore's final illness," I said quietly. "I let the renewal slip while I was caring for her." How convenient." Merritt's smile was razor thin. "And yet you continued practicing, continued billing insurance, continued—" "I renewed it 4 months ago." I pulled out my own document. "Current and valid through 2027. The lapse was addressed long before you decided to steal my research." Desmond studied both documents, his jaw tight. "The licensing issue is a distraction. We're here about research theft, not administrative lapses." "Administrative lapses reveal character," Merritt countered. "They speak to credibility, to attention to detail, to whether we should believe wild accusations from someone who couldn't manage basic professional requirements." The calculated attack was working. I could see board members exchanging glances, doubt creeping into expressions that had been sympathetic moments before. Time for the evidence I'd carried for 15 years. I reached into my bag and pulled out Lenore's medical textbook from 1988. The burgundy cover was worn, but intact, the spine creased from years of use. I set it on the table with careful reverence. "This was my wife's," I said, "Dr. Lenore Garrison, Harvard Medical School class of 1988. She had a habit of marking her books with a small 4-leaf clover next to passages she found particularly significant." I opened to a marked page, turning the book so Desmond could see. The tiny clover was visible in the margin drawn in Lenore's precise hand. 15 years ago, when I first developed the framework Merritt stole, I documented everything in a sealed envelope. Original notes, initial research proposals, the complete theoretical foundation. I pulled out a yellowed envelope, the seal unbroken. I deposited copies with Harvard Medical School's research library, where Lenore had maintained an archive of her own work. They've held it under their standard documentation protocol since 2009. Merritt's face went pale. "The envelope contains my original work." I continued, "complete with development timeline, theoretical framework, and preliminary findings. It matches what you presented to this board, except my version is dated and notarized 15 years before you supposedly developed it independently." "That could be forged," Merritt said, but his voice had lost its edge. "The Harvard archives aren't forged." Desmond leaned forward, his interest sharpening. "You're saying you have independent verification? Complete documentation, sealed and witnessed." I met Merritt's eyes. "Including the 4-leaf clover signature that appears throughout the work. Lenore's trademark. The same one that appears in her medical textbooks, her research notes, and throughout every project we collaborated on. The exit twist landed with the weight of 15 years of preparation. I hadn't just kept evidence, I'd archived it where Merritt could never reach, never alter, never explain away. That's circumstantial. Merritt tried, but he was scrambling now. A signature means nothing. It means everything when it appears in original work dated 2009, deposited in Harvard's library system, and matches the research you presented as your own in 2024. I opened the sealed envelope, carefully spreading the contents across the table. Every page marked with Lenore's clover, every calculation in my handwriting, every date notarized and archived. Desmond pulled the pages closer, studying them with an investor's attention to detail. His expression darkened as he compared them to Merritt's portfolio. "This is the same framework," he said slowly. "Identical theoretical foundation." "Because he stole it," I said simply. "After Lenore died, when I was vulnerable and grieving, he befriended me, gained access to my research, and took everything." "Dr. Garrison." A woman's voice cut through the tension. I looked up to see one of Desmond's legal team, Adrienne Sutton, 52, with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She served as Desmond's chief legal counsel, her reputation for thorough verification, legendary in medical circles. "You're claiming Harvard can verify this archive immediately on Åland up. Yes, I met her gaze. They maintain digital records of all sealed deposits, including the original submission dates and witness verification. Adrienne Sutton pulled out her phone, already dialing Harvard Medical School library archives. The book lay on the table between us, Lenore's Clover, visible to everyone, while Merritt stood frozen, watching his contingency plan meet evidence he hadn't known existed. 300 people held their breath, while a phone screen's blue glow illuminated Adrienne Sutton's face, and I understood for the first time what it meant to watch your entire life depend on pixels loading. The ballroom had gone silent. Merritt stood frozen at the table, his contingency plan meeting evidence he hadn't known existed. Adrienne's fingers moved across her phone, with practiced efficiency accessing Harvard Medical School's digital archive system, while the entire Gala watched. Harvard maintains complete metadata for all sealed research deposits, she said, her voice carrying through the silence. Timestamp verification, witness documentation, digital fingerprinting of original submissions. I watched her eyes move across the screen, reading data that would either vindicate decades of work, or leave me standing as a delusional old man making accusations I couldn't prove. Her expression shifted, sharpened. Original sealed under Ernest Garrison. She said, her voice flat and precise. Timestamp 15 years ago. Merritt Prescott's application filed January 2023. 93% content similarity. The words hit the ballroom like a physical force. I felt my legs weak in relief flooding through me so powerfully, I had to grip the table edge for support. Adrienne looked up from her phone, meeting Desmond's eyes across the conference table. "Mr. Whitfield, there is no longer any doubt." Desmond turned to Merritt slowly, his expression transforming from investor calculating odds to man confronting betrayal. 93%. The number hung in the air between them, not interpretation, not opinion. Mathematical proof of intellectual property theft quantified down to the decimal point. 93%, not all of it just enough to steal a career, while leaving 3% plausible deniability that dissolved under metadata timestamps. I looked at Merritt for the first time without fear. The perfect mask was cracking his calculated composure, fracturing under the weight of evidence he couldn't explain, a way couldn't forge, couldn't claim, was circumstantial. Harvard's archive system didn't lie. Digital fingerprints didn't fade. "There's been a mistake," Merritt said, but his voice had lost its edge. "The similarity could be 93%. Desmond repeated, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Of work you swore you developed independently. Work I invested $200 million to commercialize." The board members were pulling back from Merritt now, physical distance opening around him as the implications crystallized. Investment fraud, copyright violation, breach of fiduciary duty. The legal exposure spreading like cracks across ice. "Yet I can explain," Merritt started. The slap echoed through the Spanish ballroom like a gunshot, Celeste Whitfield stood in front of Merritt, her hand still raised from the blow, her face twisted with rage that went beyond professional betrayal into something deeply personal. 5 years, she said, her voice shaking. 5 years you told me you were single. The ballroom's attention shifted instantly from research theft to personal scandal. I watched Desmond's face go pale, watched board members lean forward, watched 300 people suddenly understand they were witnessing something beyond business fraud. Celeste. Merritt's hand went to his cheek where the slap had landed. 5 years I used my husband's money and power to get you to this position believing you love me. Celeste's voice rose, carrying to every corner of the ballroom. 5 years of lying to Desmond, of advancing your career, of opening doors you couldn't reach alone. For what? So you could steal from some old man and pretend you were brilliant to score that ik bekes is waard. I watched Celine's face as the words landed. My daughter-in-law realizing for the first time in public that her mother-in-law had bankrolled her husband's other woman. Desmond stood motionless, processing revelations, layering faster than he could absorb them. His mother's affair with the man he'd trusted to lead his largest medical investment. Family money funding the thief. 5 years of betrayal built on top of $200 million of fraud. Celeste turned to face the woman standing next to Merritt, a woman I'd seen hovering near him throughout the evening, wearing a wedding ring that caught the chandelier light. So, who is the woman wearing a wedding ring standing next to you tonight? Celeste demanded, her voice breaking. Who is she, Merritt? Another investor's wife. Another source of funding you're manipulating? The woman stepped back, her face flushing with humiliation and confusion. The wedding ring on her finger suddenly a spotlight, highlighting another layer of deception. Merritt opened his mouth, closed it. His perfect composure had shattered completely, leaving him exposed in the center of the ballroom, with nowhere to hide and no explanation that could make sense of simultaneous theft fraud, adultery and bigamy implications spreading through 300 witnesses. That's my wife, Celine said quietly from beside me. He married her 6 months ago. The revelation hit Celeste like a second slap. She staggered backward, her hand pressed to her chest as if physically wounded. 5 years of affair revealed, as 5 years of lies, not just deception, but deliberate manipulation, while he'd been married to someone else the entire final year. Merritt Prescott stood in the center of the Spanish ballroom with 300 witnesses watching, and for the first time all night he had nothing to say. Theft proven by Harvard Archives affair, exposed by his lover's mother, marriage revealed to his mistress, every carefully constructed lie collapsing simultaneously. When Merritt finally spoke, it wasn't to confess, it was to burn down the last person who still stood beside him. "Ah, Celeste, listen to me!" His voice cracked with desperation, the calculated composure completely gone. Celine is just a tool, the daughter of a poor doctor in the suburbs. The words hit the ballroom like ice water. I watched Celine's face go pale, watched her step backward as if physically struck. I married her only to have reason to access the medical environment and deceive. Merritt continued, his eyes fixed on Celeste as if no one else existed. She's nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. 300 people frozen, witnessing a man dismantle his own wife's humanity in front of Boston's elite to salvage a lie that was already burning. Celine stood perfectly still, not crying, not protesting, just standing there, absorbing the public declaration that she'd never been loved, never been valued, never been anything except a calculated access point to her father-in-law's research. That is the price of 2 years of silence, I thought, watching my daughter-in-law realize she'd protected a man who'd never seen her as human. Celeste laughed, a broken sound that held no humor. You think telling me she meant nothing makes this better? You think revealing you're capable of using people makes me want you back? I used her to get close to him. Merritt pointed at me, his desperation escalating. To gain access, to establish trust, to position myself where I could steal, Desmond finished quietly. The word you're avoiding is steal. Merritt's mouth closed. The ballroom held its breath. I watched Celine's face as the word nothing hung in the air. My daughter-in-law, learning she was never a wife, just collateral damage in a fraud scheme that had consumed 2 years of her life. The ballroom doors opened. A man in his late 40s entered, moving with the confident precision of someone who belonged in rooms where power concentrated. Sterling Wolfe. I recognized him immediately despite 15 years since his Harvard graduation. He'd been one of my best students, brilliant at connecting disparate legal precedents into airtight arguments. He'd gone on to specialize in federal intellectual property law, his reputation for thorough investigation legendary. Behind him came two people whose presence transformed the evening from scandal to criminal proceeding. The woman was Rebecca Morrison, early 40s, with short dark hair and the kind of steady gaze that came from years of witness interviews. FBI her badge visible on her belt. Beside her, David Carlson, late 30s, tall and methodical, another agent whose attention swept the ballrooms, cataloging faces and positions. "Mr. Whitfield," Sterling said, addressing Desmond directly. "I apologize for the interruption, but this matter has federal implications." Desmond nodded slowly. "Sterling, I wondered when you'd arrive." "Dr. Garrison contacted me 3 days ago." Sterling explained, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom. He'd been suspicious of the research submission for weeks. When Celine's invitation arrived, he knew something was wrong. He asked me to verify the Harvard archive records before proceeding publicly. What I found extends beyond tonight's revelation. He pulled a folder from his briefcase, opening it with practiced efficiency. Merritt Prescott was investigated for research fraud in Chicago in 2016. Sterling said, his tone flat and factual. Northwestern University Medical Center. Allegations of misappropriating a colleague's preliminary cancer research. The matter was amicably dismissed with a non-criminal agreement. Merritt left. The institution agreed never to publish the disputed work, and the investigation closed. Merritt's face went from pale to ashen. "This is a pattern," Sterling continued. "Not an isolated incident, not a misunderstanding. A documented history of intellectual property theft spanning nearly a decade. $2 million on a 60-year-old man's life policy, purchased 3 months after the thefts was finalized insurance or intent." Desmond leaned forward. "Why wasn't this discovered during due diligence?" "Because the Chicago agreement was sealed," Sterling said. "Standard practice in academic settlements. It wouldn't appear in conventional background checks. I found it through federal legal databases accessible only to certain clearance levels." He paused, meeting my eyes across the ballroom. What came next I knew would transform theft into something darker. "There's one more item," Sterling said quietly. June 2024, 3 months ago, Merritt Prescott purchased a $2 million life insurance policy on Ernest Garrison. The ballroom's temperature seemed to drop. I felt the words register, physically cold, settling into my chest. "Beneficiary Merritt Prescott," Sterling finished. The silence that followed held a different quality than before. Not scandal shock, but genuine horror, the kind that came from watching calculated theft escalate into something that looked disturbingly like premeditation. $2 million, on my life, with himself as beneficiary. Life insurance requires insurable interest. Adrienne said her lawyer's mind processing implications. Family relationship or financial dependency. Merritt would claim son-in-law status. "Purchased 3 months after finalizing the research theft," Sterling said. 6 weeks after Lenore's funeral, when Dr. Garrison was most vulnerable and isolated. Agent Morrison stepped forward, her hand resting on something in her jacket pocket. "Mr. Prescott, we have questions about the timeline and intent behind that policy." Merritt said nothing. The calculation had drained from his expression, leaving only trapped recognition that every exit had closed. Agent Morrison unfolded the warrant while Sterling placed a second document on the table, the life insurance application with Merritt's signature, dated June 2024, 3 months after Lenore's funeral. I stood there realizing that my son-in-law hadn't just stolen my research. He'd been planning what to do about the witness. Desmond's voice cut through the ballroom's silence with a question that gave my daughter-in-law 30 seconds to choose between truth and complicity. "Do you have anything to say?" 30 seconds. That was all Desmond gave her. The room held its breath, 300 witnesses, watching my daughter decide who she was. Soline stood motionless, her face pale. She knew what Desmond was offering, a final chance to speak before federal arrest became inevitable. She could lie. Tell them I'd voluntarily donated the research, create enough contract ambiguity to force prolonged legal dispute. Give Merritt time to escape, to negotiate, to transform clear theft into he said, she said civil matter. Or she could tell the truth, confirm the theft, verify the timeline, provide the witness testimony that would close every legal exit. I watched her eyes move from Merritt to me, then back to Merritt. Her husband stood waiting, his entire future depending on whether she chose him or her father-in-law. 30 seconds passed. Solene said nothing. She could lie and save him. She could tell truth and save me. She's doing neither. The silence stretched. Desmond waited, giving her every possible moment to make a choice. Agent Morrison's hand rested on her handcuffs. Sterling stood ready with supporting documentation. The ballroom held its breath. But Celine just stood there, not protecting Merritt, not protecting me, not even protecting herself. Just frozen in the paralysis of someone who valued self-preservation over either loyalty or integrity. How long is 30 seconds when your daughter-in-law could save you with truth, or condemn herself with lies and instead chooses the silence that says she values neither? "Mrs. Prescott," Desmond said quietly. "Last chance?" Celine shook her head. Not a refusal to speak, but a gesture of helpless abdication. "I can't, won't, don't know what to say." This is the second time tonight she chose silence, I thought, watching her turn away from both of us. And this time, I cannot forgive. The first silence outside the ballroom, overhearing her conversation with Merritt, I'd understood as fear, as complicated loyalty to a manipulative husband. But this silence, with federal agents waiting, and truth, the only currency that mattered, revealed something else entirely. Not fear, not loyalty, just the hollow self-preservation of someone who'd rather watch two men destroy each other than risk anything herself. "Then we proceed," Desmond said. Agent Morrison stepped forward, her badge visible in the chandelier light. "Merritt Prescott, you're under arrest for federal intellectual property theft, wire fraud, and criminal endangerment." The handcuffs clicked with a sound that echoed through the silent ballroom. Merritt didn't resist. The calculated composure had burned away completely, leaving only exhausted recognition that every exit had closed. With the Chicago case reopened based on pattern evidence, Sterling added his voice professionally neutral. "You're looking at 12 to 15 years federal prison, with multiple counts running consecutively. The non-criminal agreement is void once a second offense establishes intent. 12 to 15 years federal prison for stealing work that took me 30 years to develop. The mathematics of justice finally balanced." Agent Carlson read Miranda rights while Morrison secured the handcuffs. Standard procedure, professional, and efficient. I watched Merritt's face as the words washed over him. Right to remain silent, right to attorney, anything you say can be used against you. Desmond turned to Celeste, his expression hardening into something that looked like surgical precision. "I've known for 3 months, he said quietly. "About the affair, about where you were going on Tuesday evenings when you claimed book club, about the Pierre Hotel suite you maintained under your maiden name." Celeste's face went white. "I hired a private investigator in March." Desmond continued, his voice carrying through the ballroom with deliberate clarity. "I was waiting for sufficient evidence. Tonight provided more than I expected." He pulled a document from his jacket pocket. I recognized the weight of legal paperwork, the formal typography of binding agreements. "Our prenuptial has an adultery clause," Desmond said. "When the divorce is approved, you receive no shared assets. The Boston penthouse, the Cape house, the investment portfolio, the trust funds all revert to premarital ownership." Celeste opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. 5 years of affair funding Merritt's career with her husband's money, and Desmond had known for 3 months. Not spontaneous discovery, but calculated documentation, waiting for the moment when exposure would deliver maximum impact. "But I won't take custody of Ivy," Desmond added, his voice softening fractionally. "She needs her mother, regardless of what her mother did. You'll have reasonable visitation schedule and child support appropriate to maintaining her current lifestyle." The mercy in the middle of calculated destruction, Ivy protected, while Celeste faced consequences. Agent Morrison guided Merritt toward the ballroom exit. Agent Carlson, following with evidence boxes. Sterling gathered his documentation, the Chicago files and life insurance policy and Harvard verification, creating an airtight case. I watched them leave, my son-in-law in handcuffs, my daughter-in-law standing silent. Celeste stripped of everything she'd built through 5 years of adultery and financial manipulation. Justice delivered with surgical precision across every front. But Ivy wasn't here. My granddaughter hadn't witnessed any of this, the theft exposure, the affair revelation, the arrests and asset forfeiture. She was somewhere in this hotel, probably with a babysitter, unaware that her family had just imploded in front of Boston's elite. Merritt walked out in handcuffs past 300 witnesses. Celeste stood stripped of everything she'd built, and Celine's silence still hung in the air like condemnation. Justice had been delivered on every front, but one I still hadn't spoken to. Ivy still didn't know if my granddaughter would forgive me for destroying her mother's marriage. My daughter's hands caught my legs before I could step away, her voice breaking on the word that had once meant everything to both of us. Dad. The ballroom had emptied around us, Merritt gone in FBI custody. Celeste standing in the ruins of her marriage, 300 witnesses, dispersing with the scandal they'd carried through Boston social circles for years. But Celine remained, and now she knelt at my feet in the corner where I'd been gathering my things. Dad, I'm your only daughter. She said, her fingers gripping my pants leg with desperate strength. I was deceived by him. Please save me. I looked down at her, my only child, the reason I'd restructured my entire life after Lenore died. Her face was streaked with tears, makeup running the elegant gown she'd worn to this gala, now crumpled as she knelt on the Spanish ballroom's marble floor. She was waiting for me to kneel too, to help her up, to say the words a father was supposed to say when his daughter cried, "It's okay, we'll fix this. I forgive you." I didn't kneel. You were deceived. I repeated, my voice calm. The same tone I'd used in operating rooms when delivering difficult news to families, controlled, precise, allowing no room for misunderstanding. Yes, Celine said quickly, hope lighting in her eyes. Merritt lied to me about everything. The research, the timeline where the ideas came from. I didn't know he'd stolen from you until tonight. The entry twist reframing 2 years of complicit silence as innocent victimhood. Shifting accountability from her choices to his deception. When your mother died, I gave up Harvard to work as a poor Dorchester doctor just to have time with you, I said quietly. You were 12, motherless. I had an offer to be head of surgery at Harvard Medical, one of the most prestigious positions in American medicine. I turned it down. I remembered that day I'd resigned from Harvard. Head of surgery Celine was 12, motherless, and I'd chosen her over everything. Now watching her kneel, begging after choosing everything over me. Because the head of surgery position meant 80-hour weeks, constant travel, conferences, and committees that would have left you alone when you just lost your mother, I continued. So, I took a position at a small Dorchester clinic. Half the prestige quarter, the salary, but it meant I could be home for dinner, could help with homework, could be the parent you needed. Celine's grip on my leg loosened slightly. I thought you hated poverty, I said. The small house, the old car, the state university instead of private college. I thought you resented the sacrifice, wished I'd taken Harvard and given you the lifestyle your classmates had. Turns out you hate this very father. No, Celine whispered. I don't hate you. Merritt Prescott stole my life's work. I said, my voice still surgically calm. 30 years of research developed in that small Dorchester clinic during hours I carved out after you went to bed. He stole it to commercialize with Celeste's money, to build a career on my foundation. You knew that. I watched her face, the desperate hope fading into recognition that I wasn't going to offer the forgiveness she expected. 2 years ago, you overheard him on the phone discussing how to position the old man's framework for patent filing. I continued. You told me last summer that you had concerns about his project timeline, but never specified what those concerns were. You chose silence then for the glory his success would bring, the mansion in Cambridge, the social position, the money that came from theft. Her hands on my legs like a drowning person clinging to wreckage, not realizing she'd been the one who sank the ship. Tonight when I needed you most, you chose silence for the second time, I said. Desmond gave you 30 seconds to speak, to tell the truth, to verify the theft, to provide the witness testimony that would close every legal exit. You said nothing. I was afraid, Celine said, her voice breaking. You were calculating, I corrected gently, weighing whether my vindication or Merritt's freedom better served your interests. You chose neither because committing to either side meant accepting consequences. So, you stood silent, hoping someone else would make the choice for you. The exit twist landing with the weight of permanent severance. He didn't deceive you. You chose. He did deceive me. Celine protested, desperation creeping back into her voice. About the affair, about the other woman, about the life insurance policy. The affair and insurance were his crimes, I interrupted. The silence was yours, when you overheard that phone call 2 years ago and said nothing. When you stood in this ballroom tonight with federal agents waiting and said nothing. Those were choices, not deceptions. I gently pulled my leg free from her grip. She didn't try to hold on, just let her hands fall to her sides as she knelt there looking up at me. You're my only daughter, I said quietly. When Lenore died, you became the only family I had left. I gave up Harvard for you. I worked in that small clinic for you. I poured 30 years into research that could save lives developed in stolen hours because my days belonged to being your father. I picked up my bag, the one that still held Lenore's medical textbook, with its four-leaf clover signatures. Merritt stole my research, I said. But you stole something worse. You stole the belief that my sacrifice mattered, that choosing you over Harvard, choosing time with my daughter over professional prestige, meant I was building something worth more than a title. He didn't deceive you. You chose. I walked past my daughter's crying, without looking back, her voice still calling Dad behind me, as I crossed the empty ballroom toward where Desmond Whitfield stood, waiting near the door. Justice was complete. Merritt arrested Celeste, exposed research reclaimed, but my heart felt heavier with every step away from the only child I had left. Desmond's hand hung in the air between us, not demanding, not performing. Just offered, the gesture of a man who had run out of ceremony and was left with something simpler. I took it. His grip was firm and brief. When he released my hand, he didn't step back. He stayed at the same distance, close enough that what he said next wouldn't carry beyond the two of us. Professor Garrison, he said. 2 things. I'll be quick. I waited. First, I apologize. His voice was level, the tone of a man taking inventory of a failure without excuses. I didn't investigate Merritt's background thoroughly enough. My due diligence team missed the Chicago settlement because it was sealed. That's not an acceptable reason. It's just the reason. I created the environment where tonight was possible, and I'm sorry for what it cost you. 30 years of people apologizing to me in hospitals, families who came too late, patients who ignored symptoms for months, residents who made errors on their first solo procedures. I had learned to receive apology without performing absolution. You acknowledged it, you noted it, and you moved forward with the information it contained. Second, Desmond continued, your heart valve project will be developed under my foundation's resources in your name when you're ready, not as compensation, not as charity, as what it is the most significant cardiac reconstruction research of the last decade, which happens to belong to you. I looked at him for a long moment. The ballroom behind us was emptying, guests finding their coach staff beginning to collect glasses, the machinery of aftermath moving quietly through the room. Somewhere near the exit, I could hear Agent Morrison's voice, professional and low, coordinating with building security. 20 years ago, Desmond said, and something shifted in his expression, the investor stepping back, someone else stepping forward. Route 93, October 2004, a car accident that should have left me paralyzed from the chest down. The memory came back in pieces the way surgical memories do, not narrative but sensory, the specific angle of vertebral damage, the decision tree that had to be navigated in under 4 minutes, the attending resident's face when I told him to step back and give me room. You were the attending surgeon, Desmond said. 6 hours. You probably don't remember you saved hundreds of lives. I remember the surgery, I said honestly. I didn't know who you were. I know. He met my eyes. I've known your name since the recovery room. I've known it for 20 years. When Merritt presented this project and I read the theoretical framework, I recognized the intellectual signature. I'd seen your published work. I should have looked harder at the discrepancy. I didn't, and that's a failure I'll carry. He paused. I'm not offering to fund your research because I owe you a debt. I'm offering because it deserves to exist and because I have the resources to make sure it does. Those are 2 separate things. I want you to understand the difference. I understood the difference. That was exactly why I didn't answer immediately. I stood there with the weight of the evening settling into my bones, the rain on the coastal boulevard, Ivy's blue lips, the VIP lounge, the clover on page 45, Celine's silence, the handcuffs clicking the feel of Lenore's book against my chest through all of it. And I let Desmond's offer sit in the air between us without rushing toward it. I'll think about it, I said. Not tonight. Not tonight, he agreed without hesitation. He nodded once, the nod of a man who understood that some decisions required distance from the moment that prompted them, and walked back toward Adrienne and Sterling, who were still gathering documents near the dais. I stood alone near the ballroom exit for a moment. My wrists ached where Harrison Fletcher and Robert Hayes had twisted them. The dried blood on my hands had darkened. My shoes were still damp from kneeling in the December mud beside a crashed SUV on the coastal boulevard, and the mud had left marks on the Spanish ballroom's floor that someone on the cleaning staff would find in the morning without knowing what they meant. I was putting on my coat when I heard footsteps behind me, measured, familiar. Ernest. Phyllis Townsend was crossing the ballroom toward me with the unhurried precision of someone who had been moving through difficult rooms for decades and had learned that pace mattered more than speed. 68 years old, silver hair, the kind of steady presence that made you feel the temperature of a room, dropped to something manageable just by her entering it. Lenore's closest friend since their first year of medical school, the woman who had sat with me in the hospital the night Lenore died and hadn't said a single unnecessary word. "Clayton called me," she said when she reached me. "Then Sterling. I came as quickly as I could." She looked at my wrists. The bruises were clearly visible in the ballroom, light dark finger-shaped marks against pale skin. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes hardened and then settled, the way a person's face moves when they absorb something they intend to remember. She put her arms around me. Not congratulations, not ceremony. Just the physical fact of another person's presence after a night in which I had been dragged out of a room, knelt in December mud, and walked past my daughters crying without looking back. I felt something in my chest release that I hadn't known I was holding. "Ivy is safe," Phyllis said quietly, stepping back but keeping one hand on my arm. "She's at Memorial with Russell. They're taking good care of her." I closed my eyes for 1 second, then opened them. "The Clover," Phyllis said, and her voice shifted careful now, the way she used to speak in the hospital when delivering information that needed to land correctly. "Adrian Sutton's verification, the Harvard archive. Lenore prepared all of that." "I know," I said. "I didn't know until tonight." "She told me," Phyllis said. "The last week in your study, you were at the clinic. She wanted to go through her papers while she still could." She touched the book in my hand, Lenore's medical textbook, brown leather, the worn spine. She said, "If one day Ernest needs proof of his work, the book is enough. I've kept a copy there." I didn't understand what she meant. I asked why you'd ever need proof of your own research. "What did she say?" Phyllis looked at me steadily. She smiled, the one she used when she was already 3 steps ahead and had decided not to explain. I knew that smile. I had been the recipient of it for 32 years. "That she didn't know about merit," I said. It wasn't a question. I was working it out aloud. "She couldn't have. She died 2 years before any of this." "No," Phyllis agreed. She didn't know specifically. She knew Harvard. She knew what academic institutions do to good men's work when there's money and ambition in the room. She'd watched it happen to colleagues. She was protecting you from something she couldn't name because she loved you with enough intelligence to understand that the future holds dangers you can't see yet. I held the book against my chest, the same place it had rested all evening, right over my heart. "She left me more than evidence," I said. "Yes," Phyllis said simply. "She left you the reminder of who you've always been." She paused. "I'm parked out front. Let me drive you home." I looked back at the ballroom one final time. The chandeliers are still burning over empty tables. White tablecloths slightly disordered. Champagne glasses are abandoned at various stages of consumption. The unsigned contract still spread across the dais, where Merritt had stood with a pen in his hand 2 hours ago. Somewhere behind me in this building, Celine was still in the room she had chosen. I didn't go back to find her. I put on my coat, tucked Lenore's book into my inner jacket pocket one last time, and walked out of the Spanish ballroom beside Phyllis Townsend into the Four Seasons lobby, where the marble floor reflected the chandelier light and the night staff watched us pass without speaking. Outside Boston after the storm, cold and washed clean. The kind of night that doesn't ask anything of you except that you keep moving. I kept moving. The ride back to Dorchester takes 23 minutes on a good night. Tonight, with the roads still wet from the storm and traffic thinning toward 2 in the morning, Phyllis makes it in 18. Neither of us speaks for the first several blocks. That's the thing about a friendship built over 30 years, you learn, when silence is emptiness and when it's companionship. This silence is the second kind. Phyllis keeps both hands on the wheel, her eyes steady on the wet road ahead. And I sit in the passenger seat, watching Boston pass, outside the window, in long, slow frames, the way you watch a film when you already know the ending. The city looks different after a December storm, cleaner. The rain has washed the grime from the brick facades of the South End, and the streetlights catch the wet surfaces of everything, pavement parked, cars fire, hydrants turning the ordinary into something that almost glitters. December in Boston has a particular kind of cold beauty that only exists in the hours after a storm when the air has been scrubbed clear and the whole city breathes a little easier. By morning, it will be gray and ordinary again, But right now at 2 in the morning, with the roads nearly empty, Boston looks like a city that has just forgiven itself for something. I hold Lenore's medical textbook in my lap, not reading it, just holding it the way I've held it every day for 5 years. The brown leather cover is warm from being pressed against my chest all night. My thumb moves across the spine, a habit I didn't know I'd developed until just this moment when I notice it. Earlier tonight, Phyllis says, her voice soft in the dark car, "When you were kneeling beside Ivy in the rain, you called yourself Russell." I turn to look at her profile. Her eyes stay on the road. That she asked who I was, I say, and that was the name that came. Why Russell? I look back out the window. We're crossing into the South End now, the neighborhood shifting from glass-fronted restaurants to the older brownstones where working people have lived for generations. My father, I say. Russell Garrison. He was a mechanic in Southie, 40 years under car hoods fixing engines for people who could barely afford the parts, let alone the labor. He had hands like, I stopped searching for the right comparison, like topographic maps. Every scar had a story. The one across his left knuckle from a slipped wrench in 1971. The burn scar on his right palm from an engine fire he put out with his bare hands because the customer was watching, and he didn't want her to panic. Phyllis smiles, still watching the road. Lenore mentioned him, said he had uncommon wisdom for a man who never went to college. She was right, I say. He had the kind of intelligence that comes from paying attention, from watching people over decades and understanding that most problems have simpler solutions than educated people want to admit. He used to say that the reason doctors and lawyers and professors made things so complicated was that complicated things justified expensive fees. Phyllis laughs, a small, genuine sound in the quiet car. He wasn't wrong, she says. He wasn't wrong about most things. I look down at the book in my lap. He came to every graduation, medical school residency completion, the Harvard appointment. He wore the same suit to all three, a brown wool suit he'd bought for my mother's funeral in 1978, and he had it cleaned and pressed each time, like it was brand new. He never told me he was proud. He didn't use that word. He just showed up. Every single time, he showed up. The car moves through an intersection, the traffic light swinging on its cable in a remnant of the earlier wind. Green light, no one waiting. Phyllis eases through it without stopping. He came to my wedding, I say, sat in the front row. When I was standing in the small room behind the chapel, 26 years old, about to marry a woman whose intellect intimidated me more than any surgical board I'd ever faced, he came and found me. I was checking my tie in a mirror that was too small to see my whole face in, and he walked in and just stood there for a moment, looking at me. I can see it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. The low ceiling of that room, the smell of old wood and candle wax. Russell in his brown wool suit, his scarred mechanic's hands folded in front of him. He said, "Ernest, she is smarter than you. Listen to her more than you talk." Phyllis is quiet for a moment. Then, that's it. That was the advice. That was it. He straightened my tie. He didn't ask permission, just reached up and adjusted it because it needed adjusting, and then he walked back out to his seat. I turned the book over in my hands. Best advice I ever received. Saved my marriage more times than I can count. Anytime I thought I knew better than Lenore, anytime I was about to say something I couldn't take back, I'd hear Russell's voice in my ear. "She is smarter than you. Listen more than you talk." "And did you?" Phyllis asks. "Listen." "Every day," I say quietly, "even after she died, especially after she died." We've reached Dorchester now. The neighborhood announces itself in the way it always has, older triple-deckers with lights still on in upper floors. The corner store with the hand-painted sign that's been there since before I arrived, the park where children play in summer and teenagers sit in winter with their collars turned up. I have walked these streets for 5 years, and they know me the way streets know the people who walk them faithfully, without judgment, without ceremony, just recognition. When Ivy asked who I was tonight, I say Russell was the first name I thought of. Not Ernest, not professor, not doctor. I pause. I think because when I was kneeling in that mud with a pocket knife and a plastic straw trying to keep an 8-year-old girl alive while rain came down in sheets, that was the most Russell I have ever been. Working with what was in front of me. No operating room, no team, no equipment that costs more than a house. Just hands and knowledge and the absolute certainty that leaving was not an option. Phyllis is quiet for a long moment. "He would have liked that," she says finally. "He would have understood it," I say. There's a difference. Russell didn't deal in admiration. He dealt in recognition. He would have looked at what I did tonight and nodded the same way he nodded when I finished rebuilding a carburetor, correctly at age 12. Not good job. Just, yes, that's right. That's how it's done. Phyllis pulls the car to the curb in front of my building. The engine idles. Neither of us moves to end the moment. The book, Phyllis says softly, nodding at the textbook in my lap. Lenore gave that to you the day you married. 1988, I say. She'd written inside the front cover, "For Ernest with all my love, Lenore," and below it, she drew the clover. I open the cover and tilt it toward the streetlight coming through the windshield so Phyllis can see. The handwriting is unchanged from 36 years ago, Lenore wrote with the same precision she brought to everything, each letter, placed with the care of someone who understood that the way you wrote a thing reflected how much you meant it. She told me the clover was for luck. I told her I didn't believe in luck. She said that was exactly why she was drawing it for me. Phyllis touches the inscription lightly with one finger, not the clover, Lenore's name. The last week before she died, Phyllis says, and her voice is careful now, the way people's voices get when they're carrying something they've held for a long time. We were going through her papers. In your study, you were at the clinic, I think. She wanted to go through things while she still could. Decide what to keep, what to release, what mattered. I wait. The engine idles. Outside, a car passes slowly on the wet street, its headlights sweeping across the building facade. We found her archive copies, Phyllis continues. The sealed deposits at the Harvard Countway Library. Every research document going back to 2009, notarized and time-stamped, and stored with her 4-leaf clover on every page. I asked her why she'd done it. She said, Phyllis pauses, and I can see her choosing the words carefully, wanting to get them exactly right. She said, if one day Ernest needs proof of his work, the book is enough. I've kept a copy there. I didn't understand what she meant. I asked why you'd ever need proof of your own research. She just smiled. I look at the book in my hands. What kind of smile? I ask. My voice is steadier than I expect it to be. The one she used when she was 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room, and had decided not to explain why, Phyllis says. You know the one. I know the one. I have known that smile for 36 years. The slight lift at the left corner of her mouth, the calm in her eyes that meant she had already solved the problem and was simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. She didn't know, I say slowly, working it out as I speak. She couldn't have known specifically. She didn't know about Merritt. She didn't know about the theft. She died 2 years before any of it happened. No, Phyllis agrees. She didn't know. But she knew Harvard, I say. She knew academic institutions. She spent 30 years watching careers get eaten alive by politics and ambition, and men who took credit for work they didn't do. She watched it happen to colleagues, to students. I stop. She watched it almost happen to me twice before we had the documentation to prove otherwise. She was protecting me from something she couldn't name. She was loving you forward, Phyllis says simply. The phrase lands with the weight of something I don't have a better word for. Not grief. I have carried grief for 5 years, and I know it's shaped by now. Something else. The understanding that love practiced with enough intelligence and attention can reach past death and still be useful, still be present, still be in the most practical and literal sense the thing that saves you. Lenore had signed every page, had sealed every document, had built an archive that I hadn't known existed until the night I needed it most, in a ballroom in front of 300 witnesses, when 93% content similarity appeared on Adrienne Sutton's phone screen and 30 years of stolen work came home. She had done this quietly without telling me, because telling me would have meant acknowledging that the world was dangerous in ways she couldn't always shield me from. And Lenore, who was always 3 steps ahead and almost never wrong, had understood that the most useful kind of protection was the kind the protected person didn't know they were carrying. I've been talking to her every day since she died, I say. It's the first time I've said this out loud to anyone. In the car, in the clinic, walking home. I don't know if it helps. I don't know if she hears it. But I haven't been able to stop. Don't stop, Phyllis says without hesitation. I look at her. Don't stop, she says again simply. It helps, trust me. I don't ask her how she knows. Phyllis lost her husband 11 years ago, the year before Lenore got sick, and she has never remarried and has never seemed diminished by it. There is a kind of wholeness in her that I recognize as something earned, not given the wholeness of someone who has processed loss all the way through instead of building walls around it and calling that survival. I pick up the book and press it once against my chest over my heart, where it has rested every day for 5 years. Russell used to say that working hands never need to apologize for calluses, I tell Phyllis. He meant it about mechanics, about the visible evidence of honest labor, the kind that marks your skin permanently, because you did real work with your body and the world recorded it. I look at my hands in the dim light, the dried blood from Ivy's incision still faint under my knuckles, the bruises on my wrists where the security guards had twisted my arms. I think tonight I understand what he actually meant. All of it. The work that marks you and the work that frees you and the difference between the two. Phyllis nods. She doesn't say anything more, and she doesn't need to. I open the car door. The December air hits immediately cold and clean, the way Boston smells, in the deep hours of a winter morning when the storm is gone and the day hasn't started yet. I step out onto the sidewalk, the book in my hand, and turn back to look at Phyllis through the open door. Thank you, I say, for coming tonight, for driving me home, for remembering what she said. She asked me to, Phyllis says. Then she smiles small, and certain the smile of someone delivering a message they have been carrying for 5 years, and are relieved to finally hand over. The last week in your study going through the papers, she looked at me and said, Phyllis, when Ernest needs reminding who he is, tell him about Russell. I didn't understand then either. She pauses. I understand now. I close the car door. I stand on the sidewalk in front of my building and watch Phyllis pull away her taillights, turning the wet pavement red for a moment before she rounds the corner and disappears. Then the street is quiet. Just the distant sound of the harbor, the wind moving through bare-branched trees at the end of the block, the hum of the city holding itself in the last hours before dawn. I look down at the book one more time, at the worn brown cover at the crack in the spine, where 36 years of daily carrying has compressed the leather into something that fits my hand like it was made for it. For Ernest, with all my love, Lenore, 1988. I remember now, I say to the empty street. Then I go inside. 3 weeks after that December night, I can tell you what happened to everyone. What I cannot tell you is whether any of it feels the way I expected it would. I am sitting at my desk in the Dorchester Clinic on a Friday morning in early January, the thin winter sunlight coming through windows that need cleaning, writing this account while the details are still sharp enough to trust. Outside the street is doing what Dorchester streets do in January, going about its business without apology. A delivery truck idles at the curb across the street. 2 men in work jackets stand at the corner, breath visible in the cold air. Normal, unchanged. Lenore's book sits open on the desk beside me. Not to any particular page, just open, her handwriting visible from where I sit. For Ernest, with all my love, Lenore, 1988. Below her name, the small 4-leaf clover in blue ink. I stopped carrying the book in my jacket pocket 3 days after the 4 seasons, not because I needed it less, but because I understood finally that it didn't need to live over my heart to still be with me. Some things you carry differently once you understand what they are. Merritt Prescott sits in federal detention, awaiting trial, scheduled for June 2025. Sterling presented the full case to the federal prosecutor's office 4 days after the gala. The Harvard Archive verification, the 93%, content similarity. The Chicago settlement, the life insurance policy purchased 3 months after Lenore's funeral, with Merritt listed as sole beneficiary. Wire fraud, criminal copyright infringement, criminal endangerment. With the Chicago case reopened as pattern evidence, Sterling told me the prosecution is seeking 12 to 15 years, with multiple counts running consecutively. Sterling's investigation also uncovered accounts in the Cayman Islands and a property in Portugal registered under a shell company Merritt had opened in 2021, 2 years before the theft was finalized. He had been building his exit for 3 years. He just never expected the door to close before he reached it. I don't think about Merritt often. I expected to feel something when I learned he was in detention, satisfaction perhaps, or the specific relief of a debt finally paid. What I feel instead is closer to nothing. Not peace exactly, more like the absence of a weight I had been carrying so long I'd stopped noticing it. The way a chronic pain disappears and you only realize how constant it was by its sudden absence. Celeste Whitfield lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in Cambridge now. Desmond moved quickly, the prenuptial agreement's adultery clause activated within 72 hours, and the filing was airtight. The Boston penthouse, the Cape House, the investment portfolio all reverted to premarital ownership. What she kept was Ivy's schedule. Desmond, as he had promised in the ballroom, did not pursue full custody. Alternating weekends, school holidays. The continuity an 8-year-old needs, regardless of what her grandmother did. I don't know if Celeste is rebuilding or simply sitting in a smaller apartment trying to understand how 5 years of choices led her there. That is her story, not mine. Solene, I don't know where she is. She doesn't call. I don't call first. This is not a decision I made consciously on any particular day. It is simply the shape of what exists between us. Now the silence that grew naturally from the ballroom floor where she knelt and I walked past her. I have picked up the phone 3 times in 3 weeks with her name already on the screen. Each time I have set it back down. I don't know if I will forgive her. What I know is that I cannot wait for that answer to continue living. Russell taught me that, without meaning, to the way he showed up to every graduation in a cleaned brown wool suit, without ever saying the word proud, the way he kept fixing engines for people who could barely pay him, because the work was in front of him, and not doing it was not a choice he recognized as available. You do the work in front of you. You love the people who remain. You don't wait for wounds to finish healing before deciding life is worth the effort of continuing. The morning of the first Friday in January, I called Desmond Whitfield. He answered on the second ring. I've thought about your offer, I said. The Heart Valve Project, developing it properly with foundation resources. And I agree, but with one condition. I kept my voice level. This work bears Lenore Garrison's name as co-author, not as a dedication or memorial footnote, as co-author because she is co-author. Her questions shaped my questions for 30 years. The work would not exist without her, and I will not publish it under a name that erases that. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I became aware of the clinic sounds around me. Rita moving files in the outer office, the heating system cycling on with its familiar knock. Of course, Professor Desmond said, and his voice was warm in a way I hadn't heard from him before. That's not a condition, that's obvious. I hung up and sat for a moment in the quiet. Then I said her name aloud, not as grief, just as fact. Lenore Garrison, co-author. The first time in 5 years I had spoken her name without the weight of loss crushing the word before it left my mouth. This time, it came out clean and present the way you speak the name of someone who is still in the room. I opened the book to the first marked page, a passage on the cardiac tissue regeneration that Lenore had underlined in 1994 with a note in the margin in her handwriting. What if the scaffold isn't the problem? What if it's the signal timing? 30 years ago, that single marginal note had redirected 6 months of my research, the insight that had eventually become the theoretical foundation Merritt had tried to steal. I spread the working copy across the desk and picked up a pen. Mid-January, Desmond called on a Tuesday afternoon. Would you be willing to receive visitors Ivy has been asking about the doctor who saved her? They came on a Thursday, 11 in the morning. The back door of Desmond's Suburban opened, and Ivy climbed out with the complete physical confidence of an 8-year-old who has decided the world is an interesting place that exists to be explored. Red coat, ponytail already coming slightly loose on one side. She walked to the clinic door with her hands in her pockets and her chin up, and I thought of Russell, who had walked exactly that way his entire life. I met them in the reception area. Ivy looked at me with her blue eyes, the same eyes I had looked into on a December roadside, while I counted seconds and listened to her breathing change, and she smiled with the uncomplicated certainty of a child who has decided you are good and requires no further evidence. You're the doctor, she said. I am, I said. Grandpa told me your name is Ernest. That's an old-fashioned name. It is. I like it, she said, with the generosity of someone granting an official verdict. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, holding it out with both hands the way children present things they have worked on. I made this for you. I unfolded it carefully. Crayon and colored pencil on white paper. 2 figures in the rain, one large one small, connected by a single line that was their joined hands. Blue vertical strokes for rain covering the entire page. The large figure wore a dark jacket. The small figure had a seatbelt drawn across her body with specific precision, as if she understood it was an important detail to get right. In the upper right corner, drawn in green-colored pencil, was a small 4-leaf clover. My breath stopped for a moment. Then it came back. I drew the flower because flowers are beautiful, Ivy said, watching me look at the drawing. Grandpa said you like clovers. She couldn't know. No one had told her about Lenore's clovers, about the signed pages about 30 years of a woman marking her work with the same small symbol. Desmond had told her only that the doctor liked clovers, and Ivy, being 8 years old and thorough in her affections, had drawn one. Desmond met my eyes over her head. His expression said everything that neither of us needed to speak aloud. "Yes, thank you," I told her. "This is the most important drawing anyone has given me in a very long time." Ivy nodded, satisfied, and turned to examine the clinic reception area with the focused attention of someone conducting a professional inspection. After they left, I walked back to my office, took a piece of tape from Rita's desk, and hung the drawing on the wall beside Lenore's photograph. The photograph is from 1997 Lenore at 41, standing in the Harvard Medical Library in a gray cardigan, her reading glasses pushed up on her head, laughing at something someone off camera said. She is not looking at the camera. She is mid-laugh, entirely present in that moment, entirely herself. Next to her photograph, Ivy's drawing, 2 figures in the rain. The green clover in the corner. 2 clovers, one drawn by a woman who understood that love meant preparing for dangers you couldn't name, one drawn by a child who drew flowers because flowers are beautiful, separated by everything that had happened and connected by everything that had mattered. Outside, the January sun broke through the cloud cover that had been sitting over Dorchester for 3 days. The light came through the clinic window at a low angle, thin and clear, traveling a long distance to get there. Not warm, but present. Honest in the way that winter light is honest, arriving without pretense and asking nothing. I sat down at my desk. I opened the research to the page with Lenore's marginal note. What if the scaffold isn't the problem? What if it's the signal timing? And I began to write. Not from grief, not even from duty. From the understanding that the work was in front of me, and not doing it was not a choice I recognized as available. She had taught me that. Russell had taught me that. And Ivy, without knowing any of it, had drawn it in green crayon and handed it to me with both hands. Outside Dorchester in January, cold, thinly bright, moving forward. The same as always, exactly enough. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Sometimes the people we sacrifice everything for are the ones who hurt us most deeply. Looking back, I made choices that cost me my daughter. I gave up Harvard to raise her. I poured 30 years into research. When her husband stole that work and she chose silence, I walked away. Some say I was too harsh. Maybe. But I couldn't wait for closure that might never come. Don't sacrifice everything expecting gratitude, but don't stay silent when truth demands a voice either. Here's what I learned about dad family revenge. It's not about destruction. Real revenge is living well, despite betrayal, honoring the dead who prepared your path, finding hope in the next generation. My late wife Lenore left me evidence not from paranoia, but from love deep enough to protect me from unknowable futures. I believe God put Lenore in my life to prepare me for battles I didn't know were coming. That's the lesson of dad family revenge. Refuse to let betrayal stop your life's work. Your love for those who remain your forward motion when forgiveness feels impossible. If you've faced family betrayal or stolen work, leave a comment. How did you find your way forward? Your wisdom might help someone else here. If this story resonated, please share it with someone who needs to hear that standing for truth, even against family, isn't cruelty. For more stories about dad, family revenge done with dignity, subscribe to Dad's Calm Revenge. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story contains fictional elements for storytelling and reflection, but the lesson about truth, family, and moving forward is real. May you find strength to stand for what's right, even when it costs you everything.